451 Vidyajjiva, whom magic skill made master of the mains of ill. Then spake the Lord of Lanka's isle, Come, with thine arts beguile. With magic skill and deftest care a head like our own prepare. This head, long shafts and mighty bow, to Yannik's daughter will we show. He ceased, Vidyajjiva obeyed, and wondrous magic skill displayed. And for the art he showed an ornament of price bestowed. Then to the grove where lay the Lord of Lank took his way. Pale, wasted, weeping, on the ground the melancholy queen he found, whose thoughts in utmost stress of ill were fixed upon her husband still. The giant king approached the dame, declared in tones of joy his name. Then heeding not her wild distress bespake her, stern and pitiless, the prince to whom thy fancies cling though loved and wooed by Lank's king, who slew the noble Kara, is slain by warriors sent by me. Thy living root is hewn away, thy scornful pride is tamed today. Thy lord in battle's front has died, and shall be our bride. Hence, idle thoughts, thy hope is fled. What wilt thou, with the dead? Rise, child of Yannik, rise and be the queen of all my queens and me. Incline thine ear, and I will tell, dear lady, how thy husband fell. He bridged his way across the sea with countless troops to fight with me. The setting sun had flushed the west when on the shore they took their rest. Weary with toil no watch they kept, securely on the sands they slept. Prahasta's troops assailed our foes, and smote them in their deep repose. Scarce could their bravest prove their might, they perished in the dark of night. Axe, spear, and sword, directed well, upon the sleeping myriads fell. First in the fight Prahasta's sword reft of his head thy slumbering lord. Roused at the din Vibhisha rose, the captive of surrounding foes, and Lakshma through the woods that spread around him with his VRs fled. Han fell, one deadly stroke the neck of King Sugr broke, and Mainda sank, and Dwivid lay gasping in blood his life away. The VRs died, or fled dispersed like cloudlets when the storm has burst. Some rose aloft in air, and more ran to the sea and filled the shore. On shore, in woods, on hill and plain our conquering giants left the slain. Thus my victorious host o'erthrew the VRs, and thy husband slew, see, rudely stained with dust, and red with dropping blood, the severed head. Then, turning to Arsha's slave, the ruthless king his mandate gave, and straight Vidyajjiva who bore the head still wet with dripping gore, the arrows and the mighty bow, bent down before his master low. Vidyajjiva, cried Ra, place the head before the lady's face, and let her see with weeping eyes that low in death her husband lies. Before the queen the giant laid the beauteous head his art had made. And Ra cried, thine eyes will know these arrows and the mighty bow. With fame of this by Ra strung the earth and heaven and hell have rung. Prahasta brought it hither when his hand had slain thy prince of men. Now, widowed queen, thy hopes resign, forget thy husband and be mine. Canto XXXIIS Lament. Again her eyes with tears o'erflowed, she gazed upon the head he showed, gazed on the bow so famed of yore, the glorious bow which Ra bore. She gazed upon his cheek and brows, the eyes of her beloved spouse. His lips, the luster of his hair, the priceless gem that glittered there. The features of her lord she knew, and, pierced with anguish at the view, she lifted up her voice and cried, Kaki, art thou satisfied? Now all thy longings are fulfilled. The joy of Rahu's race is killed, and ruined is the ancient line, destroyer, by that fraud of thine. Ah, what offense, O cruel dame, what fault in Ra couldst thou blame, to drive him clad in hermit dress with to the wilderness? Great trembling seized her frame, and she fell like a stricken plantain tree. As lie the dead she lay. At length slowly regaining sense and strength, on the dear head she fixed her IPG 452 and cried with very bitter cry, Ah, when thy cold dead cheek I view, my hero, I am murdered too. Then first a faithful woman's eyes see sorrow, when her husband dies. When thou, my lord, wast nigh to save, some stealthy hand thy death wound gave. Thou art not dead, rise, hero, rise. Long life was thine, as spake the wise whose words, I ween, are ever true, for faith lies open to their view. Ah Lord, and shall thy head recline on earth's cold breast, forsaking mine, counting her chill lap dearer far than I and my caresses are? Ah, is it thus these eyes behold thy famous bow adorned with gold, whereon of yore I loved to bind sweet garlands that my hands had twined? And hast thou sought in heaven a place amid the founders of thy race, wherein the home deserved so well thy sires and Dasaratha dwell? Or dost thou shine a brighter star in skies where blessed mortals are, forsaking in thy lofty scorn the race wherein thy sires were born? Turn to my gaze, oh turn thine eye, why are thy cold lips silent, why? When first we met as youth and maid, when in thy hand my hand was laid, thy promise was thy steps should be through life and duty's path with me. Remember, faithful still, thy vow, and take me with thee even now. Is that broad bosom where I hung, that neck to which I fondly clung, where flowery garlands breathed their scent by hungry dogs and vultures rent? Shall no funereal honors grace the parted lord of Rahu's race, whose bounty liberal fees bestowed, for whom the fires of worship glowed? Causally wild with grief we'll see one sole survivor of the three who in their hermit garments went to the dark woods in banishment. Then at her cry shall Lakshma tell how, slain by night, the Vrs fell. How to thy side the giants crept, and slew the hero as he slept. Thy fate and mine the queen will know, and broken-hearted die of woe. For my unworthy sake, for mine, R.A., the glory of his line, who bridged his way across the main, is basely in a puddle slain. And I, the graceless wife he wed, have brought this ruin on his head. Me, too, on him, O.R.A.? Slay, the wife beside her husband lay. By his dear body let me rest, cheek close to cheek and breast to breast, my happy eyes I then will close, and follow whither R.A. goes. Thus cried the miserable dame. When to the king a warder came, before the giant monarch bowed and said that, followed by a crowd of councillors and lords of state, Prahasta stood before the gate, and, sent by some engrossing care, craved audience of his master there. The anxious tyrant left his seat and hastened forth the chief to meet, then summoning his nobles all, took counsel in his regal hall. When Lanka's lord had left the queen, the head and bow no more were seen. The giant king his nobles eyed, and, terrible as Ya, cried, O faithful lords, the time is come, gather our hosts with beat of drum. Nigh to the town our foeman draws, be prudent, nor reveal the cause. The nobles listened and obeyed, swift were the gathered troops arrayed, and countless rovers of the night stood burning for the hour of fight. Canto XXXII. Saram but Saram of gentler mood, with pitying eyes the mourner viewed, stole to her side and softly told glad tidings that her heart consoled, revealing with sweet voice and smile the secret of the giant's guile. She, one of those who night and day watching in turns by lay, though Urshus born felt pity's touch, and loved the hapless lady much. I heard, she said, thy bitter cry, heard R.A.'s speech and thy reply, for, hiding in the thicket near, no word or tone escaped mine ear. When R.A. hastened forth I bent my steps to follow as he went, and learned the secret cause that drove the monarch from the Asoka grove. Believe me, queen, thou needst not weep for R.A. slaughtered in his sleep. Thy line lord of men defies by day attack, by night surprise. Can even giants slay with ease vast hosts who fight with brandished trees, for whom, with eye that never sleeps, his constant watch thy R.A. keeps? PG 453 Lord of the mighty arm and chest, of earthly warriors first and best, whose fame through all the regions rings, proud sign of 100 kings. Who guards his life and loves to lend his saving succor to a friend, whose bow no hand but his can strain, thy lord, thy R.A. is not slain. Obedient to his master's will, a great magician, trained in ill, with deftest art surpassing thought that marvelous illusion wrought. Let rising hope thy grief dispel, look up and smile, for all is well, and gentle Lakshmi, Fortune's queen, regards thee with a favouring mien. Thy Ra with his VR train has thrown a bridge athwart the main, has led his countless legions o'er, and ranged them on this southern shore. These eyes have seen the hero stand girt by his hosts on Lanka's strand, and breathless spies each moment bring fresh tidings to the giant king. And every peer and lord of state is called to council and debate. She ceased, the sound, long loud and clear, of gathering armies smote her ear, where call of drum and shell rang out, the tambour and the battle shout. And, while the echoes woke, again to Yannick's child she spoke, "Hear, lady, hear the loud alarms that call the Arshus troops to arms, from stable and from stall they lead the elephant and neighing steed, brace harness on with deftest care, and chariots for the fight prepare. Swift o'er the trembling ground career mailed horsemen armed with axe and spear, and here and there in road and street the terrible battalions meet. I hear the gathering near and far, the snorting steed, the rattling car. Bold chieftains, leaders of the brave, press densely on, like wave on wave, and bright the evening sunbeams glance on helm and shield, on sword and lance. Hark, lady, to the ringing steel, hark to the rolling chariot wheel, hark to the mettled coursers neigh and drums loud thunder far away. The Queen of Fortune holds thee dear, for Lanka's troops are struck with fear, and Ra with the lotus eyes, like Indra monarch of the skies, with conquering arm will slay his foe and free his lady from her woe. Soon will his breast support thy head, and tears of joy thine eyes will shed. Soon by his mighty arm embraced the long-lost rapture wilt thou taste, and Ra, meet for highest bliss, will gain his guerdon in thy kiss." Canto XXXIV Saram's Tidings. Thus Saram her story told, and SS spirit was consoled, as when the first fresh rain is shed the parching earth is comforted. Then, filled with zeal for SS sake, again in gentle tones she spake, and, skilled in arts that soothe and please, addressed the queen in words like these: "Thy husband, lady, will I seek, say the fond words thy lips would speak, and then, unseen of any eye, back to thy side will swiftly fly. My airy flights are speedier far than Geru? As and the tempest are." Then S spake, her former woe still lift her accents faint and low: "I know thy steps, which naught can stay, can urge through heaven and hell their way. Then if thy love and changeless will would serve the helpless captive still, go forth and learn each plot and guile planned by the Lord of Lanka's Isle. With magic art like maddening wine he cheats these weeping eyes of mine, torments me with his suit, nor spares reproof or flattery, threats or prayers. These guards surround me night and day. My heart is sad, my senses stray, and helpless in my woe I fear the tyrant Ra? Even here." Then Saram replied, "I go to learn the purpose of thy foe, soon by thy side again to stand and tell thee what the king has planned." She sped, she heard with eager ears the tyrant speak his hopes and fears, where, gathered at their master's call, the nobles filled the council hall. Then swiftly, to her promise true, back to the Asoka grove she flew. The lady on the grassy ground, longing for her return, she found, who with a gentle smile, to greet the envoy, led her to a seat. Through her worn frame a shiver ran as Saram her tale began. There stood the royal mother, she besought her son to set thee free, pg 454, and to her counsel, tears and prayers, the elder nobles added theirs. "O be the faithful queen restored with honor to her angry lord, let Janasth's unhappy fight be witness of the hero's might. Han o'er the waters came and looked upon the guarded dame. Let Lanka's chiefs who fought and fell the prowess of the leader tell. In vain they sued, in vain she wept, his purpose still unchanged he kept, as clings the miser to his gold, he would not loose thee from his hold. No, never till in death he lies, will Lanka's lord release his prize. Soon slain by Ra's arrows all the giants with their king will fall, and Ra to his home will lead his black-eyed queen from bondage freed." An awful sound that moment rose from Lanka's fast approaching foes, where drum and shell in mingled peal made earth and terror rock and reel. The hosts within the walls arrayed stood trembling, in their hearts dismayed. Thought of the tempest soon to burst, and Lancash's lord, their ruin, cursed. Canto XXXV. Malyeva's speech. The fearful notes of drum and shell upon the ear of Ra fell. One moment quailed his haughty look, one moment in his fear he shook, but soon recalling wonted pride, his counselors he sternly eyed, and with a voice that thundered through the council hall began anew, Lords, I have heard, our tongues have told, how Rahu's son is fierce and bold. To Lancashire has bridged his way, and hither leads his wild array. I know your might, in battle tried, fighting and conquering by my side. Why now, when such a foe is near, looks eye to eye in silent fear? He ceased, his mother's sire well known for wisdom in the council shone, Malyev, sage and faithful guide. Thus to the monarch's speech replied, long reigns the king in safe repose, unmoved by fear of vanquished foes, whose feet by saving knowledge led in justice path delight to tread, who knows to sheath the sword or wield, to order peace, to strike or yield, prefers, when foes are stronger, peace, and bids a doubtful conflict cease. Now, king, the choice before thee lies, make peace with Ra, and be wise. This day the captive queen restore, who brings the foe to Lancash's shore. The sire by whom the worlds are swayed of yore the gods and demons made. With these injustice sided. Those fair justice for her champions chose. Still justice dwells with gods above. Injustice, fiends and giants love. Thou, through the worlds that fear thee, long hast scorned the right and loved the wrong, and justice, with thy foes allied, gives might resistless to their side. Thou, guided by thy wicked will, hast found delight in deeds of ill, and sages in their holy rest have trembled, by thy power oppressed. But they, who check each vain desire, are clothed with might which burns like fire. In them the power and glory lie which zeal and saintly fervor give. Their constant task, their sole delight is worship and each holy rite, to chant aloud the Veda hymn, nor let the sacred fires grow dim. Now through the air like thunder ring the echoes of the chants they sing. The vapors of their incense rise and veil with cloudy pall the skies, and Arsha's might grows weak and faint, killed by the power of sage and saint. By Brahma's boon thy life was screened from God, Gandharva, Yaksha, fiend. But 5 Rs, men, and bears, arrayed against thee now, thy shores invade. Red meteors, heralds of despair, flash frequent through the lurid air, foretelling to my troubled mind the ruin of the Arsha's kind. With awful thundering overhead, clouds black as night are densely spread, and oozing from the gloomy pall great drops of blood on Lank fall. Dogs roam through house and shrine to steal the sacred oil and curd and meal, cats pair with tigers, hounds with swine, and asses foals are born of kine. In these and countless signs I trace the ruin of the giant race. 'Tis Vish, U's self, who comes to storm thy city, clothed in Ra's form. For, well I ween, no mortal hand the ocean with a bridge has spanned. O giant king, the dame release, and sue to Rahu's son for peace. PG 455 Canto XXXVIRN's reply. But Ra's breast with fury swelled, and thus he spake by death impelled, while, under brows in anger bent, fierce glances from his eyes were sent, the bitter words which thou, misled by friendly thought, hast fondly said, which praise the foe and counsel fear, unheeded fall upon mine ear. How canst thou deem a mighty foe this Ra who, in stress of woe, seeks, banished as his sire decreed, assistance from the Vr breed? Am I so feeble in thine eyes, though feared by dwellers of the skies, whose might in many a battle shown the glorious race of giants own? Shall I for fear of him restore the lady whom I hither bore, exceeding fair like beauty's queen? 944 Without her well-loved lotus seen? Around the chief let Lakshma stand, Sugra, and each Vr band. Soon, Malyev, thine eyes will see this boasted Ra slain by me. I in the brunt of war defy the mightiest warriors of the sky. And if I stoop to combat men, shall I be weak and tremble then? This mangled trunk the foe may rend, but our ne'er can yield or bend, and be it vice or virtue, this nature never will belie. What marvel if he bridged the sea? Why should this deed disquiet be? This, only this, I surely know, back with his life he shall not go. Thus in loud tones the king exclaimed, and mute stood Mallev ashamed. His reverend head he humbly bent, and slowly to his mansion went. But our stayed, and deep in care held counsel with his nobles there, all entrance to secure and close, and guard the city from their foes. He bade the chief Prahasta wait, commander at the eastern gate, to fierce Mahadar, strong and brave, to keep the southern gate, he gave, where Mahasva's might should aid the chieftain with his hosts arrayed. To guard the west, O chief, more fit he placed the warrior Indri, his son, the giant's joy and boast, surrounded by Arsha's host, and mighty Sa hastened forth with Sukha to protect the north. 945 I will myself, the monarch cried, be present on the northern side. These orders for the wall's defense the tyrant gave, then parted thence, and, by the hope of victory fired, to chambers far within, retired. Canto XXXVII. Preparations. Lords of the legions of the wood, the chieftains with Vibhusha stood, and, strangers in the foeman's land, their hopes and fears in council scanned. See where Lanka's towers ascend, which are A's power and might defend, which gods, Gandharvas, fiends would fail to conquer, if they durst assail. How shall our legions pass within the city of the foe to win, with massive walls and portals barred, which are keeps with surest guard? With anxious looks the walls they eyed, and sage Vibhusha thus replied, these lords of mine 946 can answer, they within the walls have found their way, the foeman's plan and order learned, and hither to my side returned. Now, let my tongue declare how our S hosts are stationed there. Prahasta heads, in warlike state, his legions at the eastern gate. To guard the southern portal stands Mahadar, girt by Arsha's bands, where mighty Mahasva, sent by Ra's hest, his aid has lent. Guard of the gate that fronts the west is valiant Indri, the best of warriors, Ra's joy and pride. And by the youthful chieftain's side are giants, armed for fierce attacks with sword and mace and battle-axe. North, where approaches dreaded most, the king, encompassed with a host of giants trained in war, whose hands wield maces, swords and lances, stands. PG 456 All these are chiefs whom our chose as mightiest to resist his foes. And each a countless army 947 leads with elephants and cars and steeds. Then while his spirit burned for battle, words like these returned, the eastern gate BNA's care, opponent of Prahasta there. The southern gate, with troops arrayed let Angad, Bi's son, invade. The gate that fronts the falling sun shall be by brave Han won. Soon through its portals shall he lead his myriads of breed. The gate that fronts the north shall be assailed by Lakshma and by me, for I myself have sworn to kill the tyrant who delights in ill. Armed with the boon which Brahm gave, the gods of heaven he loves to brave, and through the trembling worlds he flies, oppressor of the just and wise. Thou, Jabav, and thou, O king of Vrs, all your bravest bring, and with your hosts in dense array straight to the center force your way. But let no Vr in the storm disguise him in a human form, ye chiefs who change your shapes at will, retain your Vr semblance still. Thus, when we battle with the foe, both men and Vrs will ye know, in human form will 7 appear. Myself, my brother Lakshma, here, Vibhusha, and the 4 he led from Lanka's city when he fled. Thus Rahu's son the chiefs addressed, then, gazing on Suvela's crest, transported by the lovely sight, he longed to climb the mountain height. Cantos XXVI. The ascent of Suvela. Come let us scale, the hero cried, this hill with various metals dyed. This night upon the breezy crest Sugra, Lakshma, I will rest, with sage Vibhusha. faithful friend, his counsel and his lore to lend. From those tall peaks each eager eye the foeman's city shall espy, who from the wood my darling stole and brought long anguish on my soul. Thus spake the Lord of men, and bent his footsteps to the steep ascent, and Lakshma, true in weal and woe, next followed with his shafts and bow. Vibhisha followed, next in place, the sovereign of the Vir race, and hundreds of the forest kind thronged with impetuous feet, behind. The chiefs in woods and mountains bred fast followed to Suvela's head, and gazed on length bright and fair as some gay city in the air. On glittering gates, on ramparts raised by giant hands, the chieftains gazed. They saw the mighty hosts that, skilled in arts of war, the city filled, and ramparts with new ramparts lined, the swarthy hosts that stood behind. With spirits burning for the fight they saw the giants from the height, and from 100 throats rang out defiance and the battle shout. Then sank the sun with dying flame, and soft the shades of twilight came, and the full moon's delicious light was shed upon the tranquil night. Canto XXXIX length they slept secure, the sun arose and called the chieftains from repose. Before the wondering Virs, gay with grove and garden, lank lay, where golden buds the champak showed, and bright with bloom Asoka glowed, and palm and many a tree with leaf and flower were fair to see. They looked on wood and lawn and glade, on emerald grass and dusky shade, where creepers filled the air with scent, and luscious fruit the branches bent, where bees inebriate loved to throng, and each sweet bird was loud in song. The wondering Virs passed the bound that circled that enchanting ground, and as they came a sweet breeze through the odorous alleys softly blew. Some 5 hours, at their king's behest, onward to bannered length pressed, while, startled by the stranger's tread, the birds and deer before them fled. Earth trembled at each step they took, and lank at their shouting shook. Bright rose before their wondering eyes Tricae's peak that kissed the skies, and, clothed with flowers of every hue, afar its golden radiance threw. Most fair to see the mountain's head PG 457 100 leagues in length was spread. There are a.'s town, securely placed, the summit of Trica graced. O'er leagues of land she stretched in pride, 100 long and 20 wide. They saw a lofty wall enfold the city, built of blocks of gold. They saw the beams of morning fall on dome and fane within the wall, bright with the shine that mansion gives where Vishnu in his glory lives. White crested like the Lord of Snows before them Ra's palace rose. High on 1,000 pillars raised with gold and precious stone it blazed, guarded by giant warders, crown and ornament of Lank's town. Canto XLR unattacked. Still stood the son of Rahu where Suvela's peak rose high in air, and with Sugra turned his eye to scan each quarter of the sky. There on Trica, nobly planned and built by Visvakarma's hand, he saw the lovely Lank dressed in all her varied beauty, rest. High on a tower above the gate the tyrant stood in kingly state. The royal canopy displayed above him lent its grateful shade, and servants, from the giant band, his cheek with jeweled chowries fanned. Red sandal o'er his breast was spread, his ornaments and robe were red, thus shows a cloud of darksome hue with golden sunbeams flashing through. While Ra and the chiefs intent upon the king their glances bent, up sprang Sugra from the ground and reached the turret at a bound. Unterrified the Vir stood, and wroth, with wondrous hardihood, the king in bitter words addressed, and thus his scorn and hate expressed: King of the giant race, in me the friend and slave of Rac, Lord of the world, he gives me power to smite thee in thy fence tower. While through the air his challenge rang, at Ra's face the Vir sprang, snatched from his head the kingly crown and dashed it in his fury down. Straight at his foe the giant flew, his mighty arms about him threw. With strength resistless swung him round and dashed him panting to the ground. Unharmed amid the storm of blows swift to his feet Sugra rose. Again in furious fight they met, with streams of blood their limbs were wet, each grasping his opponent's waist. Thus with their branches interlaced, which, crimson with the flowers of spring, from side to side the breezes swing, In furious wrestle you may see the Kinsick and the Semel tree. 948 They fought with fists and hands, alike prepared to parry and to strike. Long time the doubtful combat, waged with matchless strength and fury, raged. Each fiercely struck, each guarded well, till, closing, from the tower they fell, and, grasping each the other's throat, lay for an instant in the moat. They rose, and each in fiercer mood the sanguinary strife renewed. Well matched in size and strength and skill they fought the dubious battle still. While sweat and blood their limbs bedewed they met, retreated, and pursued, each stratagem and art they tried, stood front to front and swerved aside. His hand awhile the giant stayed and called his magic to his aid. But brave Sugra, swift to know the guileful purpose of the foe, gained with light leap the upper air, and breath and strength and spirit there. Then, joyous as for victory won, returned to Rahu's royal son. Canto XLI. Ra's envoy. When Ra saw each bloody trace on King Sugra's limbs and face, he cried, while, sorrowing at the view, his arms about his friend he threw, "Too venturous chieftain, kings like us bring not their lives in peril thus. Nor, save when counsel shows the need, attempt so bold, so rash a deed. Remember, I, Vibhusha? All have sorrowed fearing for thy fall. Oh, do not o'er us all I speak these desperate adventures seek." "I could not," cried Sugra, broke upon the giant king to look, pg 458 nor challenge to the deadly strife the fiend who robbed thee of thy wife. "Now Lakshma?" "Marshal," Ra cried, "our legions where the woods are wide, and stand we ready to oppose the fury of our giant foes. This day our armies shall ascend the walls which Ra's powers defend, and floods of Arshas blood shall stain the streaks encumbered with the slain." Down from the peak he came, and viewed the VR-shortered multitude. Each captain there for battle burned, each fiery eye to Lank turned. On, where the royal brothers led to Lank's walls the legions sped. The northern gate, where giant foes swarmed round their monarch, Ra chose where he in person might direct the battle, and his troops protect. What arm but his the post might keep where, strong as he who sways the deep, 949 mid thousands armed with bow and mace, stood Ra, mightiest of his race? The eastern gate was Na's post, where marshalled stood his VR host, and Manda with his troops arrayed, and Dwivet stood to lend him aid. The southern gate was Engad's care, who ranged his bold battalions there. Han by the port that faced the setting sun his legions placed, and King Sugra held the wood east of the gate where Ra stood. On every side the myriads met, and Lank's walls of close beset that scarce the roving gale could win a passage to the hosts within. Loud as the angry ocean's roar when wild waves lash the rocky shore, 10,000 throats up sent a shout that tore the firmament, and Lank with each grove and brook and tower and wall and rampart shook. The giants heard, and were appalled. Then Rahu's son to Engad called, and, led by kingly duty, 950 gave this order merciful as brave: "Go, Engad, Ra's presence seek, and thus my words of warning speak. How art thou changed and fallen now, O monarch of the giants, thou whose impious fury would not spare saint, nymph, or spirit of the air, whose foot in haughty triumph trod on Yaksha, king, and serpent god. How art thou fallen from thy pride which Brahma's favor fortified? With myriads at thy Lank's gate I stand my righteous ire to sate, and punish thee with sword and flame, the tyrant fiend who stole my dame. Now show the might, employ the guile, O monarch of the giants' isle, which stole a helpless dame away, call up thy power and strength today. Once more I warn thee, Arshas king, this hour the Maitha lady bring, and, yielding while there yet is time, seek, suppliant, pardon for the crime, or I will leave beneath the sun no living Arshas, no, not one. In vain from battle wilt thou fly, or borne on pinions seek the sky. The hand of Ra shall not spare. His fiery shaft shall smite thee there." He ceased, and Engad bowed his head. Thence like embodied flame he sped, and lighted from his airy road within the Arshas king's abode. There sate, the center of a ring of counselors, the giant king. Swift through the circle Angad pressed, and spoke with fury in his breast, sent by the lord of Kozal's his envoy here, O king, I stand, Angad the son of Bi, fame has haply taught thine ears my name. Thus in the words of Ra I am come to warn thee or defy, come forth, and fighting in the van display the spirit of a man. This arm shall slay thee, tyrant, all thy nobles, kith and kin shall fall, and earth and heaven, from terror freed, shall joy to see the oppressor bleed. Vibhusha? When his foe is slain, anointed king and peace shall reign. Once more I counsel thee, repent, avoid the mortal punishment, with honor do the dame restore, and pardon for thy sin implore. Loud rose the king's infuriate cry, seize, seize the Vr, let him die. For of his band their lord obeyed, and eager hands on Angad laid. He proposing his strength to show gave no resistance to the foe, but swiftly round his captors cast his mighty arms and held them fast. Fierce shout and cry around him rang, light to the palace roof he sprang, there his detaining arms unwound, and hurled the giants to the ground. Then, smiting with a fearful stroke, a turret from the roof he broke, as when the fiery levin sent PG 459 by Indra from the clouds has rent the proud peak of the Lord of Snow, and flung the stony mass below. Again with loud terrific cry he sprang exulting to the sky, and, joyous for his errand done, stood by the side of Rahu's son. Canto XLII. The sally. Still was the cry, the Vr foes around the leaguered city close. King Ra? From the terrace gazed and saw, with eyes where fury blazed, the Vr host in serried ranks pressed to the moat and lined the banks, and, first in splendor and in place, the lion lord of Rahu's race. And Ra looked on Lank where gay flags were streaming to the air, and, while keen sorrow pierced him through, his loving thoughts to S flew, there in deep affliction lies my darling with the fawn-like eyes. There on the cold bare ground she keeps sad vigil and for Ra weeps. Mad with the thought, charge, charge, he cried. Let earth with Arshas blood be dyed. Responsive to his call rang out loud, a universal shout, as myriads filled the moat with stone, trees, rocks, and mountains overthrown, and charging at their leader's call pressed forward furious to the wall. Some in their headlong ardor scaled the ramparts height, the guard assailed, and many a ponderous fragment rent from portal, tower, and battlement. Huge gates adorned with burnished gold were loosed and lifted from their hold. And post and pillar, with a sound like thunder, fell upon the ground. At every portal, east and west and north and south, the chieftains pressed each in his posts appointed led his myriads in the forest bred. Charge, let the gates be opened wide, charge, charge, my giants, Ra? Cried. They heard his voice, and loud and long rang the wild clamor of the throng, and shell and drum their notes upsent, and every martial instrument. Forth, at the bidding of their lord from every gate the giants poured, as, when the waters rise and swell, huge waves preceding waves impel. Again from every Vr throat a scream of fierce defiance smote the welkin, earth and sea and sky rehoed with the awful cry. The roar of elephants, the neigh of horses eager for the fray. The frequent clash of warriors' steel, the rattling of the chariot wheel. Fierce was the deadly fight, opposed in terrible array they closed, as when the gods of heaven enraged with rebel fiends wild battle waged. Axe, spear, and mace were wielded well, at every blow Vr fell. But shivered rock and brandished tree brought many a giant on his knee, to perish in his turn beneath the deadly wounds of nails and teeth. Canto XLII. The single combats. Brave chiefs of each opposing side their strength in single combat tried. Fierce and dry the fight began with Angad in the battle's van. Sampai, strongest of his race, stood with Prajangha face to face. Han Jambamai met in mortal opposition set. Vibhusha, brother of the Lord of Lank, raised his threatening sword and singled out, with eyes aglow with wrath, Citruna for his foe. The mighty Gajah Taphan sought, and Na with Nakumha fought. Sugra, Vr King, defied fierce Pragas long in battle tried, and Lakshma, fearless in the fight, encountered 5 Shah's might. To meet the royal array came wild Anakatu, fierce as flame. Mitragana, he who loved to strike his foeman and his friend alike, with Rasmakatu, known and feared where'er his ponderous flag was reared. And Yanukopa, whose delight was ruin of the sacred rite. These met and fought, with thousands more, and trampled earth was red with gore. Swift as the bolt which Indra sends when fire from heaven the mountain wren smote Indra with furious blows on Angad, queller of his foes. But Angad from his foeman tore the murderous mace the warrior bore, PG 460, and low in dust his coursers rolled, his driver, and his car of gold. Struck by the shafts Prajangha sped, the VR chief Sampai bled, but, heedless of his gashes, he crushed down the giant with a tree. Then car-born Jambamai smote Hanum on the chest and throat. But at the car the VR rushed, and chariot, steeds, and rider crushed. Sugra whirled a huge tree round, and struck fierce Pragas to the ground. One arrow shot from Lakshma? Bow laid mighty Vishal low. His giant foes round Ra pressed and shot their shafts at head and breast. But, when the iron shower was spent, 4 arrows from his bow he sent, and every missile, deftly sped. Cleft from the trunk a giant head. 951 Canto XLIV. The night. The Lord of Light had sunk and set, night came. The foemen struggled yet. And fiercer for the gloom of night grew the wild fury of the fight. Scarce could each warrior's eager eye the foeman from the friend descry. Arshus or VR? Say! Cried each, and foe knew foeman by his speech. Why wilt thou fly? O warrior, stay, turn on the foe, and rend and slay. Such were the cries, such words of fear smote through the gloom each listening ear. Each swarthy rover of the night, whose golden armor flashed with light, showed like a towering hill embraced by burning woods about his waist. The giants at the VRs flew, and ravening ate the foes they slew, with mortal bite like serpent's fang. The VRs at the giants sprang, and car and steeds and they who bore the pennons fell bedewed with gore. No serried band, no firm array the fury of their charge could stay. Down went the horse and rider, down went giant lords of high renown. Though midnight's shade was dense and dark, with skill that swerved not from the mark their bows the sons of Rahu drew, and each keen shaft a chieftain slew. Uprose the blinding dust from meads ploughed by the cars and trampling steeds, and where the warriors fell the flood was dark and terrible with blood. 6 giants 952 singled Ra out, and charged him with a furious shout loud as the roaring of the sea when every wind is raging free. 6 times he shot, 6 heads were cleft. 6 giants dead on earth were left. Nor ceased he yet, his bow he strained, and from the sounding weapon rained a storm of shafts whose fiery glare filled all the region of the air. And chieftains dropped before his aim like moths that perish in the flame. Earth glistened where the arrows fell, as shines in autumn nights a dell which fireflies, flashing through the gloom, with momentary light illume. But Indra, when Bi's son 953 the victory o'er the foe had won, saw with a fury kindled eye his mangled steeds and driver die. Then, lost in air, he fled the fight, and vanished from the victor's sight. The gods and saints glad voices raised, and Angad for his virtue praised. And Rahu's sons bestowed the meed of honor due to valorous deed. Compelled his shattered car to quit, rage filled the soul of Indra, who brooked not, strong by Brahma's grace, defeat from one of VR race. In magic mist concealed from view his bow the treacherous warrior drew, and Rahu's sons were first to feel the tempest of his winged steel. Then when his arrows failed to kill the princes who defied him still, he bound them with the serpent noose, 954 the magic bond which none might loose. Canto XLV. Indra's victory. Brave Ra, burning still to know the station of his artful foe, PG 461 gave to 10 chieftains, mid the best of all the host, his high behest. Swift rose in air the VR band, each region of the sky they scanned, but Ra's son by magic skill checked them with arrows swifter still, when streams of blood from chest and side the dauntless Vyar's limbs had dyed, the giant in his misty shroud showed like the sun obscured by cloud. Like serpents hissing through the air, his arrows smote the princely pair, and from their limbs at every rent a stream of rushing blood was sent. Like kinsick trees they stood, that show in spring their blossoms crimson glow. Then in dry with fury eyed Ikshvu's royal sons, and cried, "Not mighty Indra can assail or see me when I choose to veil my form in battle, and can ye, children of earth, contend with me? The arrowy noose this hand has shot has bound ye with a hopeless knot, and, slaughtered by my shafts and bow, to Wai's hall this hour ye go." He spoke, and shouted. Then anew the arrows from his bowstring flew, and pierced, well aimed with perfect art, each limb and joint and vital part. Transfixed with shafts in every limb, their strength relaxed, their eyes grew dim, as two tall standards side by side, with each sustaining rope untied, fall levelled by the howling blast, so earth's majestic lords at last beneath the arrowy tempest reeled, and prostrate pressed the battlefield. Canto XLVI. Indra's Triumph. The Vyar chiefs whose piercing eyes scan eagerly the earth and skies, saw the brave brothers wounded sore transfixed with darts and stained with gore. The monarch of the Vyar race, with wise Vibhisha, reached the place. Angad and Na came behind, and others of the forest kind, and standing with Han there lamented for the fallen pair. Their melancholy eyes they raised. In fruitless search a while they gazed. But magic arts Vibhisha knew. Not hidden from his keener view, though veiled by magic from the rest, the son of Ra stood confessed. Fierce and dry with savage pride the fallen sons of Rahu eyed, and every giant heart was proud as thus the warrior cried aloud, "Slain by mine arrows Ra lies, and closed in death are Lakshma's eyes. Dead are the mighty princes who Deha and Kara smote and slew. The gods and fiends may toil in vain to free them from the binding chain. The haughty chief, my father's dread, who drove him sleepless from his bed, while length troubled like a brook in rain time, heard his name and shook. He whose fierce hate our lives pursued lies helpless by my shaft subdued. Now fruitless is each wondrous deed wrought by the race the forests breed, and fruitless every toil at last like cloudlets when the rains are past." Then rose the shout of giants loud as thunder from a bursting cloud, when, deeming Ra dead, they raised their voices and the conqueror praised. Still motionless, as lie the slain, the brothers pressed the bloody plain, no sigh they drew, no breath they heaved, and lay as though of life bereaved. Proud of the deed his art had done, to Lanka's town went Ra's son, where, as he passed, all fear was stilled, and every heart with triumph filled. Sugra trembled as he viewed each fallen prince with blood bedewed, and in his eyes which overflowed with tears the flame of anger glowed. "Calm," cried Vibhisha, "calm thy fears, and stay the torrent of thy tears. Still must the chance of battle change, and victory still delight to range. Our cause again will she befriend and bring us triumph in the end. This is not death, each prince will break the spell that holds him, and awake. Nor long shall numbing magic bind the mighty arm, the lofty mind." He ceased, his finger bathed in dew across Sugra's eyes he drew. From dulling mist his vision freed, and spoke these words to suit the need: "No time is this for fear, away with fainting heart and weak delay. Now, e'en the tear which sorrow wrings from loving eyes destruction brings. Up, on to battle at the head of those brave troops which Ra led. Or guardian by his side remain till sense and strength the prince regain. Soon shall the transbound pair revive, and from our hearts all sorrow drive. Though prostrate on the earth he lie." PG 462. Deem not that Ra's death is nigh. Deem not that Lakshmi will forget or leave her darling champion yet. Rest here and be thy heart consoled. Ponder my words, be firm and bold. I, foremost in the battlefield, will rally all who faint or yield. Their staring eyes betray their fear. They whisper each in other's ear. They When they hear my cheering cry and see the friend of Ra nigh, will cast their gloom and fears away like faded wreaths of yesterday. Thus calmed he King Sugra's dread, then gave new heart to those who fled. Fierce and dry, his soul on fire with pride of conquest, sought his sire, raised reverent hands, and told him all, the battle and the prince's fall. Rejoicing at his foes' defeat up sprang the monarch from his seat, girt by his giant courtiers, round his warrior son his arms he wound, close kisses on his head applied, and heard again how Ra died. Canto XLVIIS still on the ground where Ra slept their faithful watch the VRs kept. Their Angad stood o'erwhelmed with grief and many a lord and warrior chief. And, ranged in densest mass around, their tree-armed legions held the ground. Far ranged each VR's eager eye, now swept the land, now sought the sky, all fearing, if a leaf was stirred, Arshus in the sound they heard. The Lord of Lincoln his hall, rejoicing at his foeman's fall, commanded and the warders came whoever watched the Mayflow dame. Go, cried the Arshus king, relate to Yannick's child her husband's fate. Low on the earth her Ra lies, and dark in death are Lakshma's eyes. Bring forth my car and let her ride to view the chieftains side by side. The lord to whom her fancy turned, for whose dear sake my love she spurned, lies smitten, as he fiercely led the battle, with his brother dead. Lead forth the royal lady, go her husband's lifeless body show. Then from all doubt and terror free her softening heart will turn to me. They heard his speech, the car was brought. That shady grove the warders sought where, mourning Ra night and day, the melancholy lady lay. They placed her in the car and through the yielding air they swiftly flew. The lady looked upon the plain, looked on the heaps of VR slain, saw where, triumphant in the fight, thronged the fierce rovers of the night, and 5 our chieftains, mournful-eyed, watched by the fallen brother's side. There stretched upon his gory bed each brother lay as lie the dead, with shattered mail and splintered bow pierced by the arrows of the foe. When on the pair her eyes she bent, burst from her lips a wild lament, her eyes o'erflowed, she groaned inside and thus in trembling accents cried, Canto XLVIII. SS Lament. False are they all, proved false today, the prophets of my fortune, they who in the tranquil time of old a blessed life for me foretold, predicting I should never know a childless dame's, a widow's woe. False are they all, their words are vain, for thou, my lord and life, art slain. False was the priest and vain his lore who blessed me in those days of yore by Ra's side in bliss to reign, for thou, my lord and life, art slain. They hailed me happy from my birth, proud empress of the lord of earth. They blessed me at the thought as pain, for thou, my lord and life, art slain. Ah, fruitless hope! Each glorious sign that stamps the future queen is mine, with no ill omen mark to show a widow's crushing or of woe. They say my hair is black and fine, they praise my brow's continuous line. My even teeth divided well, my bosom for its graceful swell. They praise my feet and fingers oft. They say my skin is smooth and soft, and call me happy to possess the 12 fair marks that bring success. 955 But ah, what profit shall I gain? Thou, O my lord and life, art slain. The flattering seer in former days my gentle girlish smile would praise, pg 463, and swear that holy water shed by BR man hands upon my head should make me queen, a monarch's bride. How is the promise verified? Matchless in might the brothers slew and Janeth the giant crew, and forced the indomitable sea to let them pass to rescue me. Theirs was the fiery weapon hurled by him who rules the watery world. 956 Theirs the dire shaft by Indra sped. Theirs was the mystic Brahma's head. 957 Inches vain they fought, the bold and brave, a coward's hand their death wounds gave. By secret shafts and magic spell the brothers, peers of Indra, fell. That foe, if seen by Ra's eye one moment, had not lived to fly. Though swift as thought, his utmost speed had failed him in the hour of need. No might, no tear, no prayer may stay fate's dark inevitable day. Nor could their matchless valor shield these heroes on the battlefield. I sorrow for the noble dead, I mourn my hopes forever fled. But chief my weeping eyes o'erflow for Queen Causalia's hopeless woe. The widowed queen is counting now each hour prescribed by our A's vow, and lives because she longs to see once more her princely sons and me. Then Treja? 958 of gentler mold the Urshus born, her grief consoled, dear queen, thy cause this woe dispel, thy husband lives, and all is well. Look round, in every VR face the light of joyful hope I trace. Not thus, believe me, shine the eyes of warriors when their leader dies. An army, when the chief is dead, flies from the field dispirited. Here, undisturbed in firm array, the VRs by the brothers stay. Love prompts my speech. No longer grieve. Ponder my counsel, and believe. These lips of mine from earliest youth have spoken, and shall speak, the truth. Deep in my heart thy gentle grace and patient virtues hold their place. Turn, lady, turn once more thine eye, though pierced with shafts the heroes lie, on brows and cheeks with blood drops wet the light of beauty lingers yet. Such beauty ne'er is found in death, but vanishes with parting breath. Oh, trust the hope these tokens give, the heroes are not dead, but live. Then S joined her hands, and sighed, oh, may thy words be verified. The car was turned, which fleet as thought the mourning queen to Lank brought. They led her to the garden, where again she yielded to despair, lamenting for the chiefs who bled on earth's cold bosom with the dead. Canto XLIXRA's lament. Ranged round the spot where RA fell each 5 chiefs stood sentinel. At length the mighty hero broke the trance that held him, and woke. He saw his senseless brother, dyed with blood from head to foot, and cried, what have I now to do with life or rescue of my prisoned wife, when thus before my weeping eyes, slain in the fight, my brother lies. A queen like S I may find among the best of womankind, but never such a brother, tried in war, my guardian, friend, and guide. If he be dead, the brave and true, I will not live but perish too. How, reft of Lakshma, shall I meet my mother, and Kaki greet? My brother's eager question brook, and fond Sumitra's longing look? What shall I say, o'erwhelmed with shame to cheer the miserable dame? How, when she hears her son is dead, will her sad heart be comforted? Ah me, for longer life unfit this mortal body will I quit. For Lakshma? Slaughtered for my sake, from sleep of death will never wake. Ah, when I sank oppressed with care, thy gentle voice could soothe despair. And art thou, O my brother, killed? Is that dear voice forever stilled? Cold are those lips, my brother, whence came never word to breed offense. Ah, stretched upon the gory plain my brother lies untimely slain, numbed is the mighty arm that slew the leaders of the giant crew. Transfixed with shafts, with blood streams red, thou liest on thy lowly bed. PG 464 so sinks to rest, his journey done, mid-air we raise the crimson sun. Thou, when from home and sire I fled, the wood's wild ways with me would tread, now close to thine my steps shall be, for I in death will follow thee. Vibhusha? Now will curse my name, and RA as a braggart lame, who promised out his word is vain that he in Lank's isle should reign. Return, Sugra, reft of me lead back thy VRs o'er the sea, nor hope to battle face to face with him who rules the giant race. Well have ye done and nobly fought, and death in desperate combat sought. All that heroic might can do, brave 5Rs, has been done by you. My faithful friends I now dismiss, return, my last farewell is this. Bedewed with tears was every cheek as thus the VRs heard him speak. Vibhusha? On the field had stayed the VR hosts who fled dismayed. Now lifting up his mace on high with martial step the chief drew nigh. The hosts who watched by RA's side beheld his shape and giant stride. 'Tis he, 'tis RA's son, they thought, and all in flight their safety sought. Canto L. The broken spell. Sugra viewed the flying crowd, and thus to Angad cried aloud, why run the trembling hosts, as flee storm-scattered barks across the sea? Dost thou not mark? The chief replied, transfixed with shafts, with blood streams dyed, with arrowy toils about them wound, the sons of Rahu on the ground? That moment brought Vibhisha near. Sugra knew the cause of fear, and ordered Jabav, who led the bears, to check the hosts that fled. The king of bears his hest obeyed, the Vyar's headlong flight was stayed. A little while Vibhisha eyed the brothers fallen side by side. His giant fingers wet with dew across the hero's eyes he drew, still on the pair his sad look bent, and spoke these words in wild lament, ah for the mighty chiefs brought low by coward hand and stealthy blow. Brave pair who loved the open fight, slain by that rover of the night. Dishonest is the victory won by and dry my brother's son. I on their might for aid relied, and in my cause they fought and died. Loss is the hope that soothed each pain, I live, but live no more to reign, while Lanka's lord, untouched by ill, exults in safe defiance still. Not thus, Sugra said, repine, for Lanka's isle shall still be thine. Nor let the tyrant and his son exult before the fight be done. These royal chiefs, though now dismayed, freed from the spell by Garu's aid, triumphant yet the foe shall meet and lay the robber at their feet. His hope the Vyar monarch told, and thus Vibhisha's grief consoled. Then to Sush, who at his side expectant stood, Sugra cried, when these regain their strength and sense, fly, bear them to Kishkin hence. Here with my legions will I stay, the tyrant and his kinsmen slay, and, rescued from the giant king, the Maitha lady will I bring, like glory lost of old, restored by Sakra, heaven's almighty lord. Sush made answer, hear me yet, when gods and fiends in battle met, so fiercely fought the demon crew, so wild a storm of arrows flew, that heavenly warriors faint with pain, sank smitten by the ceaseless rain. V. I Hospati, 959 with herb and spell, cured the sore wounds of those who fell. And, skilled in arts that heal and save, new life and sense and vigor gave. Far, on the milky ocean's shore, still grow those herbs in boundless store. Let swiftest Vyars thither speed and bring them for our utmost need. Those herbs that on the mountains spring let Panas and Samp I bring, for well the wondrous leaves they know, that heal each wound and life bestow. Beside that sea which, churned of yore, the Amrit on its surface bore, where the white billows lash the land, Chandra's fair height and drove. A stand, planted by gods each glittering steep looks down upon the milky deep. Let fleet Han bring us thence those herbs of wondrous influence. Meanwhile the rushing wind grew loud, red lightnings flashed from banks of cloud. The mountains shook, the wild waves rose, and smitten with resistless blows PG 465 unrooted fell each stately tree that fringed the margin of the sea. All life within the waters feared then, as the Vyars gazed, appeared King Garu's self, a wondrous sight, disclosed in flames of fiery light. From his fierce eye in sudden dread all serpents in a moment fled. And those transformed to shaft that bound the princes vanished in the ground. On Rahu's sons his eyes he bent, and hailed the lords armipotent. Then o'er them stooped the feathered king, and touched their faces with his wing. His healing touch their pangs allayed, and closed each rent the shafts had made. Again their eyes were bright and bold, again the smooth skin shone like gold. Again within their shell enshrined came memory and each power of mind, and, from those numbing bonds released, their spirit, zeal, and strength increased. Firm on their feet they stood, and then thus Ra spake, the Lord of men, by thy dear grace in sorest need from deadly bonds we both are freed. To these glad eyes as welcome now as I 960 or my sire art thou. Who art thou, mighty being? Say, thus glorious in thy bright array. He ceased, the king of birds replied, while flashed his eye with joy and pride, in me, O Rahu's son, behold one who has loved thee from of old, Garu? The lord of all that fly, thy guardian and thy friend am I. Not all the gods in heaven could loose these numbing bonds, this serpent noose, wherewith fierce Ra's son, renowned for magic arts, your limbs had bound. Those arrows fixed in every limb were mighty snakes, transformed by him. Bloodthirsty race, they live beneath the earth, and slay with venomed teeth. On, smite the Lord of Lank's Isle, but guard you from the giant's guile who each dishonest art employ and by deceit brave foes destroy. So shall the tyrant Ra bleed, and S from his power be freed. Thus Geru spake, then, swift as thought, the region of the sky he sought, where in the distance like a blaze of fire he vanished from the gaze. Then the glad Vyar's joy rang out in many a wild tumultuous shout, and the loud roar of drum and shell startled each distant sentinel. Canto Li. Dhr Shah's sally. King Ra, where he sat within, heard from his hall the deafening din, and with a spirit ill at ease addressed his lords in words like these, that warlike shout, those joyous cries, loud as the thunder of the skies, absent from every Vyar throat, some new-born confidence denote. Hark, how the sea and trembling shore re-echo with the Vyar's roar. Though arrowy chains, securely twined both Ra and his brother bind, still must the fierce triumphant shout disturb my soul with rising doubt. Swift envoys to the army send, and learn what change these cries portend. Obedient, at their master's call, fleet giants clomb the circling wall. They saw the Vyars formed and led, they saw Sugra at their head, the brothers from their bonds released, and hope grew faint and fear increased. Their faces pale with doubt and dread, back to the giant king they sped, and to his startled ear revealed the tidings of the battlefield. The flush of rage a while gave place to chilling fear that chained his face. What? Cried the tyrant, are my foes freed from the binding snakes that close with venom clasp round head and limb, bright as the sun and fierce like him, the spell a god bestowed of yore, the spell that never failed before? If arts like these be useless, how shall giant strength avail us now? Go forth, Dhr Shah, good at need, the bravest of my warriors lead, force through the foe thy conquering way, and Ra and the Vyars slay. Before his king with reverence due Dhr Shah bowed him, and withdrew. Around him at his summons came fierce legions led by chiefs of fame. Well armed with sword and spear and mace, they hurried to the gathering place, and rushed to battle, borne at speed by elephant and car and steed. Canto Lii. Dhr Shah's death. The Vyars saw the giant foe pour from the gate in gallant show. PG 466 rejoiced with warriors' fierce delight and shouted, longing for the fight. Near came the hosts and nearer yet, dire was the tumult as they met, as, serried line to line opposed, the Vyars and the giants closed. Fierce on the foe the Vyars rushed, and, wielding trees, the foremost crushed. But, feathered from the heron's wing, with eager flight from sounding string, against them shot with surest aim a ceaseless storm of arrows came, and, pierced in head and chest and side, full many a Vyar fell and died. They perished slain in fierce attacks with sword and pike and battle axe. But myriads following and dismayed their valor in the fight displayed. Unnumbered Vyars rent and torn with shaft and spear to earth were borne. But crushed by branchy trees and blocks of jagged stone and shivered rocks which the wild Vyars wielded well the bravest of the giants fell. Their trampled banners strewed the fields, and broken swords and spears and shields. And, crushed by blows which none might stay, cars, elephants, and riders lay. Dhr Shah turned his furious eye and saw his routed legions fly. Still dauntless, with terrific blows, he struck and slew his foremost foes. At every blow, at every thrust, he laid a Vyar in the dust. So fell they 'neath the sword and lance in battle's wild Gandharva 961 dance, where clang of bow and clash of sword did duty for the silvery cord, and hoofs that rang and steeds that neighed loud concert for the dancers made. So fiercely from Dhr Shah's bow his arrows rained in ceaseless flow, the Vyar legions turned and fled to all the winds discomfited. Han saw the Vyars fly. He heaved a mighty rock on high. His keen eyes flashed with wrathful fire, and, rapid as the wind his sire, strong as the rushing tempests are, he hurled it at the advancing car. Swift through the air the missile sang, The giant from the chariot sprang, ere crushed by that terrific blow lay pole and wheel and flag and bow. Han's eyes with fury blazed, a mountain's rocky peak he raised, poised it on high in act to throw, and rushed upon his giant foe. Dhr Shah saw, he raised his mace and smote Han on the face, who maddened by the wound's keen pang again upon his foeman sprang. And on the giant's head the rock descended with resistless shock. Crushed was each limb, a shapeless mass he lay upon the blood-stained grass. Canto Lii. Vajradhara's sally. When Ra in his palace heard the mournful news, his wrath was stirred, and, gasping like a furious snake, to Vajradhara thus he spake, "Go forth, my fiercest captain, lead the bravest of the giants' breed. Go forth, the sons of Rahu slay, and by their side Sujira lay." He ceased, the chieftain bowed his head, and forth with gathered troops he sped. Cars, camels, steeds were well arrayed, and colored banners o'er them played. Rings decked his arms, about his waist the life-protecting mail was braced, and on the chieftain's forehead set glittered his cap and coronet. Borne on a bannered car that glowed with golden sheen the warrior rode, and footmen marched with spear and sword and bow and mace behind their lord. In pomp and pride of warlike state they sallied from the southern gate, but saw, as on their way they sped, dread signs around and overhead. For there were meteors falling fast, though not a cloud its shadow cast. And each ill-omened bird and beast, foreboding death, the fear increased, while many a giant slipped and reeled, falling before he reached the field. They met in mortal strife engaged, and long and fierce the battle raged. Spears, swords uplifted, gleamed and flashed, and many a chief to earth was dashed. A ceaseless storm of arrows rained, and limbs were pierced and blood distained. Terrific was the sound that filled the air, and every heart was chilled, as hurtling o'er the giants flew the rocks and trees which Vyars threw. Fierce as a hungry lion when unwary dare approach his den, PG 467 Angad, his eyes with fury red, waving a tree above his head, rushed with wild charge which none could stay where stood the giant's dense array. Like tall trees levelled by the blast before him fell the giants fast, and earth that streamed with blood was strewn with warriors, steeds, and cars o'erthrown. Canto live. Vajradhara's death. The giant leader fiercely rained his arrows and the fight maintained. Each time the clanging cord he drew as certain shaft Avyar slew. Then, as the creatures he has made fly to the Lord of Life for aid, to Angad for protection fled the Vyar hosts dispirited. Then raged the battle fiercer yet when Angad and the giant met. 100,000 arrows, hot with flames of fire, the giant shot. And every shaft he deftly sent his foeman's body pierced and rent. From Angad's limbs ran floods of gore, a stately tree from earth he tore, which, maddened as his gashes bled, he hurled at his opponent's head. His bow the dauntless giant drew. To meet the tree swift arrows flew, checked the huge missile's onward way, and harmless on the earth it lay. A while the Vyar chieftain gazed, then from the earth a rock he raised rent from a thunder-split in height, and cast it with resistless might. The giant marked, and, mace in hand, leapt from his chariot to the sand, ere the rough mass descending broke the seat, the wheel, the pole and yoke. Then Angad seized a shattered hill, whereon the trees were flowering still, and with full force the jagged peak fell crashing on the giant's cheek. He staggered, reeled, and fell, the blood gushed from the giant in a flood. Reft of his might, each sense astray, a while upon the sand he lay. But strength and wandering sense returned again, his eyes with fury burned, and with his mace upraised on high he wounded Angad on the thigh. Then from his hand his mace he threw, and closer to his foeman drew. Then with their fists they fought, and smote on brow and cheek and chest and throat. Worn out with toil, their limbs bedewed with blood, the strife they still renewed, like Mercury and fiery Mars met in fierce battle mid the stars. A while the deadly fight was stayed, each armed him with his trusty blade whose sheath with tinkling bell supplied, and golden net adorned his side. and grasped his ponderous leather shield to fight till one should fall or yield. Unnumbered wounds they gave and took, their wearied bodies reeled and shook. At length upon the sand that drank streams of their blood the warriors sank, but as a serpent rears his head sore wounded by a peasant's tread, so Angad, fallen on his knees, yet gathered strength his sword to seize. And, severed by the glittering blade, the giant's head on earth was laid. I omit cantos LV, LVI, LVII, and LVIII, which relate how Acampan and Prahasta sally out and fall. There is little novelty of incident in these cantos, and the results are exactly the same as before. In Canto LV, Acampan, at the command of R.A., leads forth his troops. Evil omens are seen and heard. The enemies meet, and many fall on each side, the VRs transfixed with arrows, the Arshusses crushed with rocks and trees. In Canto LVI Acampan sees that the Arshusses are worsted, and fights with redoubled rage and vigor. The VRs fall fast under his nets of arrows. Hanum comes to the rescue. He throws mountain peaks at the giant, which are dexterously stopped with flights of arrows, and at last beats him down and kills him with the tree. In Canto LVII, R.A. is seriously alarmed. He declares that he himself, come Hawker, A or Prahasta, must go forth. Prahasta sallies out vaunting that the fowls of the air shall eat their fill of VR flesh. In Canto LVII, the two armies meet. Dire is the conflict. Ceaseless is the rain of stones and arrows. At last Na meets Prahasta and breaks his bow. Prahasta leaps from his car, and the giant and the VR fight on foot. Na with a huge tree crushes his opponent, who falls like a tree when its roots are cut. PG 468 Canto LIX. Arn's sally. They told him that the chief was killed, and R.A.'s breast with rage was filled. Then, fiercely moved by wrath and pride, thus to his lords the tyrant cried, "No longer, nobles, may we show this lofty scorn for such a foe, by whom our bravest, with his train of steeds and elephants, is slain. Myself this day will take the field, and Rahu's sons their lives shall yield." High on the royal car, that glowed with glory from his face, he rode. And tambour, shell, and drum pealed out, and joyful was each giant's shout. A mighty host, with eyeballs red like flames of kindled fire, he led. He passed the city gate, and viewed, arrayed, the VR multitude, those wielding massy rocks, and these armed with the stems of uptorn trees, and R.A. with his eyes aglow with warlike ardor viewed the foe, and thus the brave Vibhusha, best of weapon-wielding chiefs, addressed, "What captain leads this bright array, where lances gleam and banners play, and thousands armed with spear and sword await the bidding of their lord?" "Seest thou, Vibhusha?" answered one whose face is as the morning sun, preeminent for hugest frame. Acampan 962 is the giant's name. Behold the chieftain, chariot-borne, whom Brahma's chosen gifts adorn. He wields a bow like Indra's own. A line on his flag is shown, his eyes with baleful fire are lit, 'tis R.A.'s son, 'tis Indra. There, brandishing in mighty hands his huge bow, Attica stands. And the proud warrior o'er whose head a moon-bright canopy is spread, whose might, in many a battle tried, has tamed imperial Indra's pride. Who wears a crown of burnished gold, is Lank's lord the lofty Sould. He ceased, and R.A. knew his foe, and laid an arrow on his bow. "Woe to the wretch," he cried, "whom fate abandons to my deadly hate." He spoke, and, firm by Lakshma's side, the giant to the fray defied. The lord of Lank bade his train of warriors by the gates remain, to guard the city from surprise by R.A.'s force-born allies. Then, as some monster of the sea cleaves swift advancing billows, he charged with impetuous onset through the foe, and cleft the host in two. Sugra ran, the king to meet, a hill uprooted from its seat he hurled, with trees that graced the height against the rover of the night, but cleft with shafts that checked its way, harmless upon the earth it lay. Then fiercer R.A.'s fury grew, An arrow from his side he drew, swift as a thunderbolt, aglow with fire, and launched it at the foe. Through flesh and bone a way it found, and stretched Sugra on the ground. Sush! And Nala saw him fall. Gavsha, Glavia heard their call, and, poising hills, in act to fling they charged amain the giant king. They charged, they hurled the hills in vain, he checked them with his arrowy rain, and every brave assailant felt the piercing wounds his missiles dealt. Then smitten by the shafts that came keen, fleet, and thick, with certain aim, they fled to our sure defense against the oppressor's violence. Then, reverent palm to palm applied, thus Lakshma to his brother cried, "To me, my lord, the task entrust to lay this giant in the dust." "Go, then," said Ra, "bravely fight. Beat down this rover of the night." But he, unmatched in bold emprise, fears not the Lord of earth and skies. Keep on thy guard, with keenest eye thy moments of attack espy. Let hand and eye in due accord protect thee with the bow and sword. Then Lakshma round his brother threw his mighty arms in honor due, bent lowly down his reverent head, and onward to the battle sped. Han from afar beheld how Ra's shafts the Vyars quelled. To meet the giant's car he ran, raised his right arm and thus began, "If Brahma's boon thy life has screened from Yaksha, god, Gandharva, fiend, with these contending fear no ill, but tremble at Avyar still." With fury flashing from his eye the Lord of Lank made reply, "Strike, Vyar, strike, the fray begin, and hope eternal fame to win. This arm shall prove thee in the strife." PG 469 and end thy glory and thy life. "Remember," cried the wine god's son, "remember all that I have done, my prowess, king, thou knowest well, shown in the fight when action 963 fell. With heavy hand the giant smote Han on the chest and throat, who reeled and staggered to and fro, stunned for a moment by the blow. Till, mustering strength, his hand he reared and struck the foe whom Indra feared. His huge limbs bent beneath the shock, as mountains, in an earthquake, rock, and from the gods and sages pealed shouts of loud triumph as he reeled. But strength returning nerved his frame, his eyeballs flashed with fiercer flame. No living creature might resist that blow of his tremendous fist which fell upon Han's flank, and to the ground the Vyar sank. No sign of life his body showed, and Ra in his chariot rode at Na. And his arrowy rain fell on the captain and his train. Fierce Na stayed his Vyar band, and, heaving with his single hand a mountain peak, with vigorous swing hurled the huge missile at the king. Han life and strength regained, burned for the fight and thus complained, "Why, coward giant, didst thou flee and leave the doubtful fight with me?" 7 mighty arrows keen and fleet the giant launched, the hill to meet. And, all its force and fury stayed, the harmless mass on earth was laid. Enraged the Vyar chief beheld the mountain peak by force repelled, and rained upon the foe a shower of trees uptorn with branch and flower. Still his keen shafts which pierced and rent each flying tree the giant sent, still was the Vyar doomed to feel the tempest of the winged steel. Then, smarting from that arrowy storm, the Vyar chief condensed his form, 964, and lightly leaping from the ground on Ra's standard footing found. Then springing unimpeded down stood on his bow and golden crown. The Vyar's nimble leaps amazed Ikshvu's son who stood and gazed. The giant, raging in his heart, laid on his bow a fiery dart. The Vyar on his flagstaff eyed, and thus in tones of fury cried, "Well skilled in magic lore art thou, but will thine art avail thee now? See if thy magic will defend thy life against the dart I send." Thus Ra spake, the giant king, and loosed the arrow from the string. It pierced, with direst fury sped, the Vyar with its flaming head. His father's might, his power innate preserved him from the threatened fate. Upon his knees he fell, distained with streams of blood, but life remained. Still Ra for the battle burned, at Lakshma. Next his car he turned, and charged amain with furious show, straining in mighty hands his bow. "Come, Lakshma!" cried, "essay the fight, leave foes unworthy of thy might. Thus Lakshma spoke, and Lanka's lord heard the dread thunder of the cord. And mad with burning rage and pride in hasty words like these replied, Joy, joy is mine, O Rahu's son, thy fate today thou canst not shun. Slain by mine arrows thou shalt tread the gloomy pathway of the dead. Thus as he spoke his bow he drew, and 7 keen shafts at Lakshma flew, but Rahu's son with surest aim cleft every arrow as it came. Thus with fleet shafts each warrior shot against his foe, and rested not. Then one choice weapon from his store, by Brahma's self bestowed of yore, fierce as the flames that end the world, the giant king at Lakshma hurled. The hero fell, and racked with pain, scarce could his hand his bow retain. But sense and strength resumed their seat and, lightly springing to his feet, he struck with one tremendous stroke and Ra's bow in splinters broke. From Lakshma's cord 3 arrows flew and pierced the giant monarch through. Sore wounded Ra closed, and round Ikshvu's son his strong arms wound. With strength unrivalled, Brahma's gift, he strove from earth his foe to lift. Shall I, he cried, who overthrow Mount Meru and the Lord of Snow, and heaven and all who dwell therein, be foiled by one of Ra's kin? But though he heaved, and toiled, and strained, unmoved Ikshvu's son remained. His frame by those huge arms compressed the giant's God-given force confessed, but conscious that himself was part PG 470 of Vish. He was firm in heart. The wine god's son the fight beheld, and rushed at Ra. Rage impelled. Down crashed his mighty hand. The foe full in the chest received the blow. His eyes grew dim, his knees gave way, and senseless on the earth he lay. The wine god's son to Ra bore deep wounded Lakshma, stained with gore. He whom no foe might lift or bend was light as air to such a friend. The dart that Lakshma's side had cleft, untouched, the hero's body left, and flashing through the air afar resumed its place in Ra's car. And, waxing well though wounded sore, he felt the deadly pain no more. And Ra, though with deep wounds pained, slowly his sense and strength regained, and furious still and undismayed on bow and shaft his hand he laid. Then Hanum to Ra cried, Ascend my back, great chief, and ride like Vish. You born on Garu's wing, to battle with the giant king. So, burning for the dire attack, rode Ra on the Vr's back, and with fierce accents loud and slow thus gave defiance to the foe, while his strained bowstring made a sound like thunder when it shakes the ground. Stay, monarch of the giants, stay, the penalty of sin to pay. Stay. Whither wilt thou fly, and how escape the death that waits thee now? No word the giant king returned, his eyes with flames of fury burned. His arm was stretched, his bow was bent, and swift his fiery shafts were sent. Red torrents from the Vr flowed, then Ra near to Ra strode, and with keen darts that never failed, the chariot of the king assailed. With surest aim his arrows flew, the driver and the steeds he slew, and shattered with the pointed steel car, flag, and pole and yoke and wheel. As Indra hurls his bolt to smite Mount Meru's heaven-ascending height, so Ra with a flaming dart struck Lanka's monarch near the heart, who reeled and fell beneath the blow and from loose fingers dropped his bow. Bright as the sun, with crescent head, from Ra's bow an arrow sped, and from his forehead, proud no more, cleft the bright coronet he wore. Then Ra stood by Ra's side and to the conquered giant cried, Well hast thou fought, thine arm has slain strong heroes of the Vr train. I will not strike or slay thee now, for weary, faint with fight art thou. To Lanka's town thy footsteps bend, and there the night securely spend. Tomorrow come with tar and bow, and then my prowess shalt thou know. He ceased, the king in humbled pride rose from the earth and naught replied. With wounded limbs and shattered crown he sought again his royal town. Canto LX. Come Hakarna roused. With humbled heart and broken pride through Lanka's gate the giant hied, crushed, like an elephant beneath a lion's spring and murderous teeth, or like a serpent neath the wing and talons of the feathered king. Such was the giant's wild alarm at arrows shot by Ra's arm. Shafts with red lightning round them curled, like Brahma's bolts that end the world. Supported on his golden throne, with failing eye and humbled tone, "Giants," he cried, "the toil is vain, fruitless the penance and the pain, if I whom Indra owned his peer, secure from gods, a mortal fear. My soul remembers, now too late, Lord Brahma's words who spoke my fate. Tremble, proud giant," thus they ran, "and dread thy death from slighted man. Secure from gods and demons live, and serpents, by the boon I give. Against their power thy life is charmed, but against man is still unarmed. This Ra is the man foretold by Inara? Yas 965 lips of old, fear, Ra? Basest of the base, for of mine own imperial race a prince in after time shall spring and thee and thine to ruin bring. And Vidavid 966 ere she died slain by my ruthless insult, cried, PG 471 a scion of my royal line shall slay, vile wretch, both thee and thine. She in a later birth became King Yannick's child, now Ra's dame. Nanvara 967 foretold this fate, and 68 when I moved her hate, and Rambh 969 and the lovely child of Beru? 970 by my touch defiled. I know the fated hour is nigh, hence, captains, to your stations fly. Let warders on the rampart stand, place at each gate a watchful band. And, terror of immortal eyes, let mightiest Kumhawker arise. He, slumbering, free from care and pain, by Brahma's curse, for months has lain. But when Prahasta's death he hears, mine own defeat and doubts and fears, the chief will rise to smite the foe and his unrevolved valor show. Then Rahu's royal sons and all the Vyars neath his might will fall. The giant lords his hest obeyed, they left him, trembling and afraid, and from the royal palace strode to Kumhawker's vast abode. They carried garlands sweet and fresh, and reeking loads of blood and flesh. They reached the dwelling where he lay, a cave that reached a league each way, sweet with fair blooms of lovely scent and bright with golden ornament. His breathings came so fierce and fast, scarce could the giants brook the blast. They found him on a golden bed with his huge limbs at length outspread. They piled their heaps of venison near, fat buffaloes and boars and deer. With wreaths of flowers they fanned his face, and incense sweetened all the place. Each raised his mighty voice as loud as thunders of an angry cloud, and conchs their stirring summons gave that echoed through the giant's cave. Then on his breast they rained their blows, and high the wild commotion rose when cymbal vied with drum and horn. And war cries on the gale upborne. Through all the air loud discord spread, and, struck with fear, the birds fell dead. But still he slept and took his rest. Then dashed they on his shaggy chest clubs, maces, fragments of the rock, he moved not once, nor felt the shock. The giants made one effort more with shell and drum and shout and roar. Club, mallet, mace, in fury plied, rained blows upon his breast and side. And elephants were urged to aid, and camels groaned and horses neighed. They drenched him with 100 pails, they tore his ears with teeth and nails. They bound together many a mace and beat him on the head and face. And elephants with ponderous tread stamped on his limbs and chest and head. The unusual weight his slumber broke, he started, shook his sides, and woke. And, heedless of the wounds and blows, yawning with thirst and hunger rose, his jaws like hell gaped fierce and wide, dire as the flame neath ocean's tide. Red as the sun on Meru's crest the giant's face his wrath expressed, and every burning breath he drew was like the blast that rushes through the mountain cedars. Up he raised his awful head with eyes that blazed like comets, dire as death in form who threats the worlds with fire and storm. The giants pointed to their stores of buffaloes and deer and boars, and straight he gorged him with a flood of wine, with marrow, flesh, and blood. He ceased, the giants ventured near and bent their lowly heads in fear. Then Kumhawker glared with eyes still heavy in their first surprise, still drowsy from his troubled rest, and thus the giant band addressed. How have ye dared my sleep to break? No trifling cause should bid me wake. Say, is all well? Or tell the need that drives you with unruly speed to wake me. Mark the words I say, the king shall tremble in dismay. PG 472. The fire be quenched and Indra slain ere ye shall break my rest in vain. Why Shah answered, Chieftain, hear. No god or fiend excites our fear. But men in arms our walls assail, we tremble lest their might prevail. For vengeful Ra vows to slay the foe who stole his queen away, and, matchless for his warlike deeds, a host of mighty Vyars leads. Ere now a monstrous Vyar came, laid Lank waste with ruthless flame, and Aksha, Ra's offspring, slew with all his warrior retinue. Our king who never trembled yet for heavenly hosts in battle met, at length the general dread has shared, o'erthrown by Ra's arm and spared. He ceased, and Kumhawker spake, I will go forth and vengeance take. Will tread their hosts beneath my feet, then triumph flushed our king will meet. Our giant bands shall eat their fill of Vyars whom this arm shall kill. The prince's blood shall be my draught, the chieftain shall by you be quaffed. He spake, and, with an eager stride that shook the earth, to Ra hied. Canto LXI. The Vyar Shalarm. The son of Rahu near the wall saw, proudly towering over all, the mighty giant stride along attended by the warrior throng. Heard Kumhawker as heavy feet awake the echoes of the street. And, with the lust of battle fired, turned to Vibhisha and inquired, Vibhisha, tell that chieftain's name who rears so high his mountain frame. With glittering helm and lion eyes, preeminent in might and size above the rest of giant birth, he towers the standard of the earth. And all the Vyars when they see the mighty warrior turn and flee. In him, Vibhisha answered, no Visravesh's son, the immortal's foe, fierce Kumhawker, mightier far than gods and fiends and giants are. He conquered Ya in the fight, and Indra trembling owned his might. His arm the gods and fiends subdued, Gandharvas and the serpent brood. The rest of his gigantic race are wondrous strong by God-giving grace. But nature at his birth to him gave matchless power and strength of limb. Scarce was he born, fierce monster, when he killed and ate 1,000 men. The trembling race of men, appalled, on Indra for protection called. And he, to save the suffering world, his bolt at Kumhawker hurled. So awful was the monster's yell that fear on all the nations fell. He, rushing on with furious roar, a tusk from huge Arat tore, and dealt the god so dire a blow that Indra reeling left his foe, and with the gods and mortals fled to Brahma's throne dispirited. O Brahm, thus the suppliants cried, some refuge for this woe provide. If thus his maw the giant sate, soon will the world be desolate. The self-existent calmed their woe, and spake in anger to their foe, as thou wast born, Pulastia's son, that worlds might weep by thee undone, thou like the dead henceforth shalt be, such is the curse I lay on thee. Senseless he lay, nor spoke nor stirred. Such was the power of Brahma's word. But Ra, troubled for his sake, thus to the self-existent spake, who lops the tree his care has reared when golden fruit has first appeared. Not thus, O Brahm, deal with one descended from thine own dear son. 971 Still thou, O Lord, thy word must keep, he may not die, but let him sleep. Yet fix a time for him to break the chains of slumber and awake. He ceased, and Brahm made reply. 6 months in slumber shall he lie, and then arising for a day shall cast the numbing bonds away. Now Ra, in his doubt and dread, has roused the monster from his bed, who comes in this the hour of need on slaughtered Vyar's flesh to feed. Each 5 are, when his awestruck eyes behold the monstrous chieftain, flies. With hopeful words their minds deceive, and let our trembling hosts believe they see no giant, but, displayed, a lifeless engine deftly made. Then Ra called to Na, haste, let troops near every gate be placed, and, armed with fragments of the rock and trees, each lane and alley block. PG 473. Thus Ra spoke, the chief obeyed, and swift the VRs stood arrayed, as when the black clouds their battle form, the summit of a hill to storm. Canto LXIRN's request. Along bright Lancash's royal road the giant, roused from slumber, strode, while from the houses on his head a rain of fragrant flowers was shed. He reached the monarch's gate whereon rich gems and golden fretwork shone. Through court and corridor that shook beneath his tread his way he took, and stood within the chamber where his brother sat in dark despair. But sudden, at the grateful sight the monarch's eye again grew bright. He started up, forgot his fear, and drew his giant brother near. The younger pressed the elder's feet and paid the king observance meet, then cried, "O monarch, speak thy will, and let my care thy word fulfill. What sudden terror and dismay have burst the bonds in which I lay?" Fierce flashed the flame from Ra's eye, as thus in wrath he made reply, "Fair time, I ween, for sleep is this, to lull thy soul in tranquil bliss, unheeding, in oblivion drowned, the dangers that our lives surround. Brave Ra, De Serapha's son, a passage o'er the sea has won, and, with the VR monarch's aid, round Lancash's walls his hosts arrayed. Though never in the deadly field my Arshus troops were known to yield, the bravest of the giant train have fallen by the VRs slain. Hence comes my fear. O fierce and brave, go forth, our threatened Lanc save. Go forth, a dreadful vengeance take, for this, O chief, I bade thee wake. The gods and trembling fiends have felt the furious blows thine arm has dealt. Earth has no warrior, heaven has none to match thy might, Prolastia's son. Canto LXII. Come Hakarna's boast. Then come Hawker. Laughed aloud and cried, "O monarch, once so proud, we warned thee, but thou wouldst not hear. And now the fruits of sin appear. We warned thee, I, thy nobles, all who love thee, in thy council hall. Those sovereigns who with blinded eyes neglect the foe their hearts despise, soon, falling from their high estate bring on themselves the stroke of fate. Accept at length, thy life to save, the counsel sage Vibhisha gave, the prudent counsel spurned before, and to her lord restore." 972. The monarch frowned, by passion moved, and thus in angry words reproved, "Wilt thou thine elder brother school, forgetful of the ancient rule that bids thee treat him as the sage who guides thee with the lore of age? Think on the dangers of the day, nor idly throw thy words away, if, led astray, by passion stirred, I in the pride of power have erred. If deeds of old were done amiss, no time for vain reproaches this. Up, brother! Let thy loving care the errors of thy king repair." To calm his wrath, his soul to ease, the younger spake in words like these, "Yea, from our bosoms let us cast all idle sorrow for the past. Let grief and anger be repressed, again be firm and self-possessed. This day, O monarch, shalt thou see the VR legions turn and flee, and Ra and his brother slain with their heart's blood shall dye the plain. Yea, if the god who rules the dead, and Veru their battalions led. If Indra with the storm gods came against me, and the Lord of Flame, still would I fight with all and slay thy banded foes, my king, today. If Rahu's son this day withstand the blow of mine uplifted hand, deep in his breast my darts shall sink, and torrents of his life blood drink. Oh fear not, in my promise trust, this arm shall lay him in the dust, shall leave the fierce Sugra dyed with gore, and Lakshma by his side, and strike the great Han down, the spoiler of our glorious town." 973. PG 474. Canto LXIV. Mahadara's speech. He ceased, and when his lips were closed Mahadara thus his rede opposed, "Why wilt thou shame thy noble birth and speak like one of little worth? Why boast thee thus in youthful pride, rejecting wisdom for thy guide? How will thy single arm oppose the victor of 1,000 foes, who proved in Genest his might and slew the rovers of the night? The remnant of those legions, they who saw his power that fatal day, now in this leaguered city dread the mighty chief from whom they fled. And wouldst thou meet the Lord of Men, beard the great lion in his den, and, When thine eyes are open, break the slumber of a deadly snake. Who may an equal battle wage with him, so awful in his rage, fierce as the god of death whom none may vanquish, Dasaratha's son. But, shall the lady still refuse compliance with thy will? No, listen, king, to this design which soon shall make the captive thine. This day through lank streaks proclaim that four of us 974 of highest fame with Cumhawker. At our head will strike the son of Rahu dead. Forth to the battle will we go and prove our prowess on the foe. Then, if our bold attempts succeed, no further plans thy hopes will need. But if in vain our warriors strive, and Rahu's son be left alive, we will return, and, wounded sore, our armor stained with gouts of gore, will show the shafts that rent each frame, keen arrows marked with our A's name, and say we giants have devoured the princes whom our might o'erpowered. Then let the joyful tidings spread that Rahu's royal sons are dead. To all around thy pleasure show, gold, pearls, and precious robes, bestow. Gay garlands round the portals twine, enjoy the banquet and the wine. Then go, the scornful lady seek, and woo her when her heart is weak. Rich robes and gold and gems display, and gently wile her grief away. Then will she feel her hopeless state, widowed, forlorn, and desolate. Know that on thee her bliss depends, far from her country and her friends. Then, her proud spirit overthrown, the lady will be all thine own. Canto LXV. Cumhakarna's speech. But haughty Cumhawker spurn his counsel, and to our turned, thy life from peril will I free and slay the foe who threatens thee. A hero never vaunts in vain, like bellowing clouds devoid of rain, nor, monarch, be thine ear inclined to counsellors of slavish kind, who with mean arts their king mislead and mar each gallant plan and deed. Oh, let not words like his beguile the glorious king of Lanka's isle. Thus scornful Cumhawker cried, and with a laugh replied, Mahadar fears and fain would shun the battle with Ikshvu's son. Of all my giant warriors, who is strong as thou, and brave and true? Ride, conquer, to the battle ride, and tame the foeman's senseless pride. Go forth like to the field, and let thine arm thy trident wield. Scared by the lightning of thine eye the Vir hosts will turn and fly. And when he sees thee near, with trembling heart will own his fear. The champion heard, and, well content, forth from the hall his footsteps bent. He grasped his spear, the foeman's dread, black iron all, both shaft and head, which, dyed in many a battle, bore great spots of slaughtered victims' gore. The king upon his neck had thrown the jeweled chain which graced his own, and garlands of delicious scent about his limbs for ornament. Around his arms gay bracelets clung, and pendants in his ears were hung. Adorned with gold, about his waist his coat of mail was firmly braced, and like an 975 o'er the god who rules the sky he proudly trod. Behind him went a mighty throng of giant warriors tall and strong, PG 475 on elephants of noblest breeds. With cars, with camels, and with steeds, and, armed with spear and axe and sword were fain to battle for their lord 976 Canto LXVI. Cumhakarna's sally. In pomp and pride of warlike state the giant passed the city gate. He raised his voice, the hills, the shore of Lanka's sea returned the roar. The Virs saw the chief draw nigh whom not the ruler of the sky, nor monarch of the dead, might vanquish, and affrighted fled. When royal Angad, Bi's son, saw the scared Virs turn and run, undaunted still he kept his ground, and shouted as he gazed around, O Nala, stay nor let your souls your generous worth forget, O Kamud and Gav Shah, why like base-born Virs will ye fly? Turn, nor shame your order thus, this giant is no match for us. They heard his voice, the flight was stayed. Again for war they stood arrayed, and hurled upon the foe a shower of mountain peaks and trees in flower. Still on his limbs their missiles rained, unmoved, their blows he still sustained, and seemed unconscious of the stroke when rocks against his body broke. Fierce as the flame when woods are dry, he charged with fury in his eye. Like trees consumed with fervent heat, they fell beneath the giant's feet. Some o'er the ground, dyed red with gore, fled wild with terror to the shore, and, deeming that all hope was lost, ran to the bridge they erst had crossed. Some clomb the trees their lives to save, some sought the mountain and the cave. Some hid them in the bosky dell, and there in death-like slumber fell. When Angad saw the chieftains fly, he called them with a mighty cry, "Once more, O VRs, charge once more, on to the battle as before. In all her compass earth has not, to hide you safe, one secret spot." What? Leave your arms? Each nobler dame will scorn her consort for the shame. This blot upon your names efface, and keep your valor from disgrace. Stay, chieftains. Wherefore will ye run, a band of warriors scared by one? Scarce would they hear, they would not stay, and basely spoke in wild dismay. Have we not fought, and fought in vain? Have we not seen our mightiest slain? The giant's matchless force we fear, and fly because our lives are dear. But Biai's son with gentle art dispelled their dread and cheered each heart. They turned and formed and waited still, obedient to the prince's will. Canto LXVII cum Hakarna's death. Thus from their flight the VRs turned, and every heart for battle burned, determined on the spot to die or gain a warrior's meed on high. Again the VRs stooped to seize their weapons, rocks and fallen trees. Again the deadly fight began, and fiercely at the giant ran. Unmoved the monster kept his place, he raised on high his awful mace, whirled the huge weapon round his head, and laid the foremost VRs dead. 8,000 fell bedewed with gore, then sank and died 700 more. Then 30, 20, 10, or 8 at each fierce onset met their fate, and fast the fallen were devoured like snakes by Geru. Biko powered. Then Dwivid from the VR van, armed with an uptorn mountain, ran, like a huge cloud when fierce winds blow, and charged amain the mountain foe. With wondrous force the hill he threw, o'er Cumhawker. As head it flew, and falling on his host afar crushed many a giant, steed, and car. Rocks, trees, by fierce Huns sped, rained fast on Cumhawker. As head, whose spear each deadlier missile stopped, and harmless on the plain it dropped. PG 476 Then with his furious eyes aglow the giant rushed upon the foe, where, with a woody hill upheaved, Hun's might his charge received. Through his vast frame the giant felt the angry blow Hun dealt. He reeled a moment, sore distressed, then smote the VR on the breast, as when the war god's furious stroke through Crunch's hill a passage broke. 977 Fierce was the blow, and deep and wide the rent, with crimson torrents dyed. Hun, maddened by the pain, roared like a cloud that brings the rain, and from each Arsha's throat rang out loud clamor and exultant shout. Then Na hurled with mustered might the fragment of a mountain height. Nor would the rock the foe have missed, but Cumhawker raised his fist and smote so fiercely that the mass fell crushed to powder on the grass. 5 chieftains of the VR race 978 charged Cumhawker. Of face to face, and his huge frame they wildly beat with rocks and trees and hands and feet. Round Rishab first the giant wound his arms and hurled him to the ground, where speechless, senseless, wounded sore, he lay his face besmeared with gore. Then Na with his fist he slew, and Sarab with his knee o'erthrew, nor could Gavshah's strength withstand the force of his terrific hand. At Gantam's eager call rushed thousands to avenge their fall, nor ceased those VRs to assail with knee and fist and tooth and nail. Around his foes the giant threw his mighty arms, and nearer drew the captives subject to his will, then snatched them up and ate his fill. There was no respite then, no pause, fast gaped and closed his hell-like jaws, yet, prisoned in that gloomy cave, some 5 hours still their lives could save, some through his nostrils found a way, some through his ears resought the day. Like Indra with his thunder, like the god of death in act to strike, the giant seized his ponderous spear, and charged the foe in swift career. Before his might the VRs fell, nor could their hosts his charge repel. Then trembling, nor ashamed to run, they turned and fled to Rahu's son. When Bi's warrior son 979 beheld their flight, his heart with fury swelled. He rushed, with his terrific shout, to meet the foe and stay the rout. He came, he hurled a mountain peak, and smote the giant on the cheek. His ponderous spear the giant threw, fierce was the cast, the aim was true. But Angad, trained in war and tried, saw ere it came, and leapt aside. Then with his open hand he smote the giant on the chest and throat. That blow the giant scarce sustained, but sense and strength were soon regained. With force which nothing might resist he caught the VR by the wrist, whirled him, as if in pastime, round, and dashed him senseless on the ground. There low on earth his foe lay crushed. At King Sugra next he rushed, who, waiting for the charge, stood still, and heaved on high a shattered hill. He looked on Kumhawker, dyed with streams of blood, and fiercely cried, "Great glory has thine arm achieved, and thousands of their lives bereaved. Now leave awhile thy meaner foes, and brook the hill Sugra throws." He spoke, and hurled the mass he held. The giant's chest the stroke repelled. Then on the VRs fell despair, and Arsha's clamor filled the air. The giant raised his arm, and fast came the tremendous 980 spear he cast. Han caught it as it flew, and napped it on his knee in two. The giant saw the broken spear, his clouded eye confessed his fear. Yet at Sugra's head he sent a peak from Lank's mountain rent. PG 477 The rushing mass no might could stay, Sugra fell and senseless lay. The giant stooped his foe to seize, and bore him thence, as bears the breeze a cloud in autumn through the sky. He heard the sad immortals sigh, and shouts of triumph long and loud went up from all the Arsha's crowd. Through Lank's gate the giant passed holding his struggling captive fast, while from each terrace, house, and tower fell on his haughty head a shower of fragrant scent and flowery rain, blossoms and leaves and scattered grain. 981 By slow degrees the Vyarsh lord felt life and sense and strength restored. He heard the giant's joyful boast, he thought upon his VR host. His teeth and feet he fiercely plied, and bit and rent the giant's side, who, mad with pain and smeared with gore, hurled to the ground the load he bore. Regardless of a storm of blows swift to the sky the VR rose, then lightly like a flying ball high overleaped the city wall, and joyous for deliverance one regained the side of Rahu's son. And Kumhawker, mad with hate and fury, sallied from the gate. The carnage of the foe renewed and filled his maw with gory food. Slaying, with headlong frenzy blind, both 5 our foes and giant kind. Nor would Sumitra's valiant son 982 the might of Kumhawker shun, who through his harness felt the sting of keen shafts loosened from the string. His heart confessed the warrior's power, and, bleeding from the ceaseless shower that smote him on the chest and side, with words like these the giant cried, well fought, Sumitra's son. Eternal glory hast thou won, for thou in desperate fight hast met the victor never conquered yet, whom, borne on huge Arat's back, e'en Indra trembles to attack. Go, son of Queen Sumitra, go, thy valour and thy strength I know. Now all my hope and earnest will is in the fight to kill. Let him beneath my weapons fall, and I will meet and conquer all. The chieftain, of Sumitra born, made answer as he laughed in scorn, Yea, thou hast won a victor's fame from trembling gods and Indra's shame. There waits thee now a mightier foe whose prowess thou hast yet to know. There, famous in 100 lands, the son of Rahu stands. Straight at the king the giant sped, and earth was shaken at his tread. His bow the hero grasped and strained, and deadly shafts in torrents rained. As Kumhawker felt each stroke from his huge mouth burst fire and smoke. His hands were loosed in mortal pain and dropped his weapons on the plain. Though reft of spear and sword and mace no terror changed his haughty face. With heavy hands he rained his blows and smote to death 1,000 foes. Where'er the furious monster strode wild down his limbs the red blood flowed like torrents down a mountain side, VRs and bears and giants died. High o'er his head a rock he swung, and the huge mass at Ra flung. but Ra's arrows bright as flame shattered the mountain as it came. Then Rahu's son, his eyes aglow with burning anger, charged the foe, and as his bow he strained and tried, with fearful clang the cord replied. Wroth at the bowstring's threatening clang, to meet his foe the giant sprang. High towering with enormous frame, huge as a wood-crowned hill he came. But Ra, firm and self-possessed, in words like these the foe addressed, "Draw near, O Arshus Lord, draw near, nor turn thee from the fight in fear. Thou meetest Ra face to face, destroyer of the giant race. Come, fight, and thou shalt feel this hour, laid low in death, thy conqueror's power." He ceased, and mad with wrath and pride the giant champion thus replied, "Come thou to me and thou shalt find a foeman of a different kind. No Kara, no Virha, who hast met a mightier warrior now. The strength of Kumhawker? A fear, and dread the iron mace I rear. This mace in days of yore subdued the gods and Diav multitude. Prove, lion of Ikshvu's line, thy power upon these limbs of mine. Then, after trial, shalt thou bleed, and with thy flesh my hunger feed." He ceased, and Ra, undismayed, upon his cord those arrows laid, PG 478, which pierced the stateliest trees through, and Bi king of Vyars slew. They flew, they smote, but smote in vain those mighty limbs that felt no pain. Then Ra sent with surest aim the dart that bore the wine god's name. The missile from the giant tore his huge arm, and the mace it bore, which crushed the Vyars where it fell, and dire was Kumhawker. Azrael. The giant seized a tree, and then rushed madly at the Lord of Men. Another dart, Lord Indra's own, to meet his furious onset thrown, his left arm from the shoulder lopped, and like a mountain peak it dropped. Then from the bow of Ra sped 2 arrows, each with crescent head. And, winged with might which naught could stay, they cut the giant's legs away. They fell, and awful was the sound as those vast columns shook the ground. And sky and sea and hill and cave in echoing roars their answer gave. Then from his side the hero drew a dart that like the tempest flew. No deadlier shaft has ever flown than that which Indra called his own, nor could the giant's mail or neck the fury of the missile check. Through skin and flesh and bone it smote, and rent asunder head and throat. Down with the sound of thunder rolled the head adorned with rings of gold, and crushed to pieces in its fall a gate, a tower, a massive wall. Hurled to the sea the body fell, terrific was the ocean's swell, nor could swift fin and nimble leap save the crushed creatures of the deep. Thus he who plagued in impious pride the gods and Bearmans fought and died. Glad were the hosts of heaven, and long the air re-echoed with their song. 983 Canto LXVII. Arn's Lament. They ran to Ra in his hall and told him of his brother's fall. Fierce as the god who rules the dead, upon the routed foe he fed. And, victor for a while, at length fell slain by Ra's matchless strength. Now like a mighty hill in size his mangled trunk extended lies, and where he fell, a bleeding mass, blocks Lank's gate that none may pass. The monarch heard, his strength gave way, and fainting on the ground he lay. Grieved at the giant's mournful tale, long, shrill was Ra's wail. And Tristar in sorrow bowed his triple head, and wept aloud. Mahadar, Masva shed hot tears and mourned their brother dead. At length, his wandering sense restored, in loud lament cried Lank's lord, "Ah chief, for might and valour famed, whose arm the haughty foeman tamed, forsaking me, thy friends and all, why hast thou fled to Yswell? Why hast thou fled to taste no more the slaughtered foeman's flesh and gore? Ah me, my life is done today, my better arm is lopped away. Whereon in danger I relied, and, fearless, gods and fiends defied. How could a shaft from Ra's bow the matchless giant overthrow, whose iron frame so strong of yore the crushing bolt of Indra bore? This day the gods and sages meet and triumph at their foes' defeat. This day the Vyar chiefs will boast and, with new ardor fired, their host in fiercer onset will assail our city, and the ramparts scale. What care I for a monarch's name, for empire, or the Maythil dame? What joy can power and riches give, or life that I should care to live, unless this arm immortal fray the slayer of my brother slay. For me, of Cumhawker, bereft, death is the only solace left. And I will seek, o'erwhelmed with woes, the realm to which my brother goes. Ah, meal-minded, not to take his counsel when Vibhisha spake when he this evil day foretold, my foolish heart was overbold, I drove my sage adviser hence, and reaped the fruits of mine offense. PG 479 Canto LXIX. Nartak's death. Pierced to the soul by sorrow's sting, thus wailed the evil-hearted king. Then Trisir stood forth and cried, Yea, father, he has fought and died, our bravest, and the loss is sore, but rouse thee, and lament no more. Hast thou not still thy coat of mail, thy bow and shafts which never fail? 1,000 asses draw thy car which roars like thunder heard afar. Thy valour and thy warrior skill, thy God-given strength, are left thee still. Unarmed, thy matchless might subdued the gods and Diav multitude. Armed with thy glorious weapons, how shall Rahu's son oppose thee now? Or, sire, within thy palace stay, and I myself will sweep away thy foes, like Eru? When he makes a banquet of the writhing snakes. Soon Rahu's son shall press the plain, as Narak 984 fell by Vish. You slain, or Sambar 985 inches rebellious pride who met the king of gods 986 and died. The monarch heard, his courage grew, and life and spirit came anew. Devtak and Nartak heard, and their fierce souls with joy were stirred. And Attica 987 burned to fight, and heard the summons with delight. While from the rest loud rang the cry, I too will fight, and I, and I. The joyous king his sons embraced, with golden chains and jewels graced, and sent them forth with stirring speech of benison and praise to each. Forth from the gate the princes sped, and ranged for war the troops they led. The VR legions charged anew, and trees and rocks for missiles flew. They saw Nartak's mighty form borne on the steed that mocked the storm. To check his charge in vain they strove, straight through their host his way he clove, as springs a dolphin through the tide, and countless VRs fell and died, and mangled limbs and corpses lay to mark the chief's ensanguined way. Sugra saw them fall or fly when fierce Nartak's steed was nigh, and marked the giant where he sped o'er heaps of dying or of dead. He bade the royal Angad face that bravest chief of giant race. As springs the sun from clouds dispersed, so Angad from the VRs burst. No weapon for the fight he bore save nails and teeth, and sought no more. Leave, giant chieftain, thus he spoke, leave foes unworthy of thy stroke, and bend against a nobler heart the terrors of thy deadly dart. Nartak heard the words he spake, fast breathing, like an angry snake, with bloody teeth his lips he pressed and hurled his dart at Angad's breast. True was the aim and fierce the stroke, yet on his breast the missile broke. Then Angad at the giant flew, and with a blow his courser slew, the fierce hand crushed through flesh and bone, and steed and rider fell o'erthrown. Nartak's eyes with fury blazed, his heavy hand on high he raised and struck in savage wrath the head of Biai's son, who reeled and bled, fainted a moment and no more, then stronger, fiercer than before smote with that fist which naught could stay, and crushed to death the giant lay. Canto LXX. The death of Trisir. Then raged the Arshus chiefs, and all burned to avenge Nartak's fall. Devtak raised his club on high and rushed at Angad with the cry. Behind came Trisir, and near Mahadar charged with levelled spear. There Angad stood to fight with three, high o'er his head he waved a tree, and at Devtak, swift and true as Indra's flaming bolt, it flew. But, cut by giant shafts in twain, with diminished force it flew in vain. A shower of trees and blocks of stone from Angad's hand was fiercely thrown. But well his club Devtak plied and turned each rock and tree aside. Nor yet, by three such foes assailed, PG 480 the heart of Angad sank or quailed. He slew the mighty beast that bore Mahadar, from his head he tore a bleeding tusk, and blow on blow fell fiercely on his Arshus foe. The giant reeled, but strength regained, and furious strokes on Angad rained, who, wounded by the storm of blows, sank on his knees, but swiftly rose. Then Trisir, as a peace pang, drew his great bow with awful clang, and fixed 3 arrows from a sheaf full in the forehead of the chief. Hans saw, nor long delayed to speed with an aid to his aid, who at the 3-faced giant sent a peak from Lank's mountain rent. But Trisir with certain aim shot rapid arrows as it came, and shivered by their force it broke and fell to earth with flash and smoke. Then as the wine god's son came nigh, Devtak reared his mace on high. Hans smote him on the head and stretched the monstrous giant dead. Fierce Trisir with fury strained his bow, and showers of arrows rained that smote on Na's side and chest. He sank a moment, sore distressed, but quickly gathered strength to seize a mountain with its crown of trees. Crushed by the hill, disdained with gore, Mahadar felt to rise no more. Then Trisir raised high his spear which chilled the trembling foe with fear and, like a flashing meteor through the air at Han it flew. The Vr shunned the threatened stroke, and with strong hands the weapon broke. The giant drew his glittering blade, dire was the wound the weapon made deep in the Vr's ample chest, who, for a moment sore pressed, raised his broad hand, regaining might, and struck the rover of the night. Fierce was the blow, with one wild yell on the earth the monster fell. Hans seized his fallen sword which served no more its senseless lord, and from the monster triple-necked smote his huge heads with crowns bedecked. Then Masva burned with ire. Fierce flashed his eyes with vengeful fire. A moment on the dead he gazed, then his black mace aloft was raised, and down the mass of iron came that struck and shook the Vr's frame. Han's chest was well-nigh crushed, and from his mouth red torrents gushed, yet served one instant to restore his spirit. From the foe he tore his awful mace, and smote, and laid the giant in the dust dismayed. Crushed were his jaws and teeth and eyes, breathless and still he lay as lies a summit from a mountain rent by him who rules the firmament. Canto LXXI. Attic A's death. But Attic A's wrath grew high to see his noblest kinsman die. He, fiercest of the giant race, presuming still on Brahma's grace. Proud tamer of the immortals' pride, whose power and might with Indra's vied, for blood and vengeful carnage burned, and on the foe his fury turned. High on a car that flashed and glowed bright as 1,000 suns he rode. Around his princely brows was set a rich bejeweled coronet. Gold pendants in his ears he wore. He strained and tried the bow he bore, and ever, as a shaft he aimed, his name and royal race proclaimed. Scarce might the Vr's brook to hear his clanging bow and voice of fear. To Rahu's elder son they fled, their sure defense in woe and dread. Then Ra bent his eyes afar and saw the giant in his car fast following the flying crowd and roaring like a rainy cloud. He, with the lust of battle fired, turned to Vibhisha and inquired, "Say, who is this, of mountain size, this archer with the lion eyes?" His car, which strikes our host with awe, 1,000 eager coursers draw. Surrounded by the flashing spears which line his car, the chief appears like some huge cloud when lightnings play about it on the stormy day. And the great bow he joys to hold, whose bended back is bright with gold, as Indra's bow makes glad the skies, that best of chariots glorifies. Oh, see the sun-like splendor flung from the great flag above him hung, where, blazoned with refulgent lines, RU 988 the dreadful dragon shines. Full 30 quivers near his side, his car with shafts is well supplied, PG 481 and flashing like the light of stars gleam his 2 mighty scimitars. Say, best of giants, who is he before whose face the Vr's flee? Thus Ra spake. Vibhisha eyed the giant's chief, and thus replied, "This Ra, this is Ra's son, high fame his youthful might has won. He, best of warriors, bows his ear the wisdom of the wise to hear. Supreme is he mid those who know the mastery of sword and bow. Unrivaled in the bold attack on elephants or coursers' back, he knows, beside, each subtler art, to win the foe, to bribe, or part. On him the giant hosts rely, and fear no ill when he is nigh. This peerless chieftain bears the name of Attica, huge of frame, whom Damian of yore to array, Lord of Lank bore. Roused by his bowstring's awful clang, to meet their foes the Viars sprang. Armed with tall trees from Lank's wood, and rocks and mountain peaks, they stood. The giant's arrows, gold bedecked, the storm of hurtling missiles checked. And ever on his foeman poured fierce tempest from his clanging cord. Nor could the Viar chief sustain his shaft's intolerable rain. They fled, the victor gained the place where stood the lord of Rahu's race, and cried with voice of thunder, "Lo, borne on my car, with shaft and bow, I, champion of the giants, scorn to fight with weaklings humbly born. Come forth your bravest, if he dare, and fight with one who will not spare." Forth sprang Sumitra's noble child, 989, and strained his ready bow, and smiled. And giants trembled as the clang through heaven and earth re-hooing rang. The giant to his string applied a pointed shaft, and proudly cried, "Turn, turn, Sumitra's son, and fly, for terrible as death am I. Fly, nor that youthful form oppose, untrained in war, to warriors' blows. What? Wilt thou waste thy childish breath and wake the dormant fire of death? Cast down, rash boy, that useless bow, preserve thy life, uninjured go." He ceased, and stirred by wrath and pride Sumitra's noble son replied, "By warlike deed, not words alone, the valour of the brave is shown. Cease with vain boasts my scorn to move, and with thine arm thy prowess prove. Borne on thy car, with sword and bow, with all thine arms, thy valour show. Fight, and my deadly shafts this day low in the dust thy head shall lay, and, rushing fast in ceaseless flood, shall rend thy flesh and drink thy blood." His giant foe no answer made, but on a string an arrow laid. He raised his arm, the cord he drew, at Lakshma's breast the arrow flew. Sumitra's son, his foeman's dread, shot a fleet shaft with crescent head, which cleft that arrow pointed well, and harmless to the earth it fell. A shower of shafts from Lakshma's bow fell fast and furious on the foe, who quailed not as the missile smote with idle force his iron coat. Then came the friendly wine god near, and whispered thus in Lakshma's ear, "Such shafts as these in vain assail thy foe's impenetrable mail. A more tremendous missile try, or never may the giant die. Employ the mighty spell, and aim the weapon known by Brahma's name." He ceased. Sumitra's son obeyed, on his great bow the shaft was laid, and with a roar like thunder, true as Indra's flashing bolt, it flew. The giant poured his shafts like rain to check its course, but all in vain. With spear and mace and sword he tried to turn the fiery dart aside. Winged with a force which naught could check, it smote the monster in the neck, and, sundered from his shoulders, rolled to earth his head and helm of gold. Canto LXXIR and speech. The giants spent, in rage and grief, their eyes upon the fallen chief, then flying wild with fear and pale to our aid, bore the mournful tale. He heard how Attica died, then turned him to his lords, and cried, "Where are they now, why bravest here, wise to consult and prompt to dare? Where is Dhr Shah, skilled to wield all weapons in the battlefield? A Campan, and Prahasta's might, and Kumhakar? A bold in fight? These and many Arshas more, each master of the arms he bore, PG 482, who every foe in fight o'erthrew, the victors none could e'er subdue, have perished by the might of one, the vengeful arm of Rahu's son. In vain I cast mine eyes around, no match for our here is found, no chief to stand before that bow whose deadly shafts have caused our woe. Now, warriors, to your stations hence. Provide ye for the wall's defense, and be the Asoka garden, where the lady lies, your special care. Be every lane and passage barred, set at each gate a chosen guard. And with your troops, where danger calls, be ready to defend the walls. Each movement of the Viars mark. Observe them when the skies grow dark. Be ready in the dead of night, and ere the morning bring the light. taught by our loss we may not scorn these legions of the forest born. He ceased, the Arshus lords obeyed. Each at his post his troops arrayed, and, torn with pangs that pierced him through, the monarch from the hall withdrew. Canto LXXII. Indra's victory. But Indra the fierce and bold with words like these his sire consoled, "Dismiss, O king, thy grief and dread, and be not thus disquieted. Against this numbing sorrow strive, for Indra is yet alive. And none in battle may withstand the fury of his strong right hand. This day, O sire, thine eyes shall see the sons of Rahu slain by me." He ceased, he bade the king farewell. Clear, mid the roar of drum and shell, the clash of sword and harness rang, as to his car the warrior sprang. Close followed by his Arshus train, through Lanka's gate he reached the plain. Then down he leapt, and bade a band of giants by the chariot stand, then with due rites, as rules require, did worship to the Lord of Fire. The sacred oil, as texts ordain, with wreaths of scented flowers and grain, within the flame in order due, that mightiest of the giants threw. There on the ground were spear and blade, and arrowy leaves and fuel laid. An iron ladle deep and wide, and robes with sanguine colors dyed. Beside him stood a sable goat, the giant seized it by the throat, and straight from the consuming flame auspicious signs of victory came. For swiftly, curling to the right, the fire leapt up with willing light undimmed by smoky cloud, and, red like gold, upon the offering fed. They brought him, while the flame yet glowed, the dart by Brahma's grace bestowed, and all the arms he wielded well were charmed with text and holy spell. Then fiercer for the fight he burned, and at the foe his chariot turned, while all his followers lifting high their maces charged with furious cry. Dire, yet more dire the battle grew, as rocks and trees and arrows flew. The giant shot his shafts like rain, and 5 Rs fell in myriad slain. Sugra, Angad, and A felt the wounds his hurtling arrows dealt. His shafts the blood of Gaia drank. Han reeled and Manda sank. Bright as the glances of the sun came the swift darts they could not shun. Caught in the arrowy nets he wove, in vain the sons of Rahu strove. And Ra, by the darts oppressed, his brother chieftain thus addressed: "See, first this giant warrior sends destruction, mid our friends, and now his arrows thick and fast their binding net around us cast. To Brahma's grace the chieftain owes the matchless power and might he shows, and mortal strength in vain contends with him whom Brahma's self befriends. Then let us still with dauntless hearts endure this storm of pelting darts. Soon must we sink bereaved of sense, and then the victor, hurrying hence, will seek his father in his hall and tell him of his foeman's fall." He ceased, o'erpowered by shaft and spell the sons of Rahu reeled and fell. The Arshus on their bodies gazed, and, mid the shouts his followers raised, sped back to Lanka to relate in R.A.'s hall the prince's fate. Canto LXXIV. The medicinal herbs. The shades of falling night concealed the carnage of the battlefield, pg 483, which, bearing each a blazing brand, Han and Vibhisha scanned, moving with slow and anxious tread among the dying and the dead. Sad was the scene of slaughter shown where'er the torch's light was thrown. Here mountain forms of Vrs lay whose heads and limbs were lopped away, arms, legs and fingers strewed the ground, and severed heads lay thick around. The earth was moist with sanguine streams, and sighs were heard and groans and screams. There lay Sugra still and cold, there Angad, once so brave and bold. There Jabav his might reposed, there Vigadar's eyes were closed. There in the dust was Nala's pride, and Dwivid lay by Manda's side. Where'er they looked the ensanguined plain was strewn with myriads of the slain. 990 they sought with keenly searching eyes King Jabav supremely wise. His strength had failed by a slow decay, and pierced with countless shafts he lay. They saw, and hastened to his side, and thus the sage Vibhisha cried, "Thee, monarch of the bears, we seek, speak if thou yet art living, speak." Slow came the aged chief's reply. Scarce could he say with many a sigh, torn with keen shafts which pierce each limb, My strength is gone, my sight is dim. Yet though I scarce can raise mine eyes, thy voice, O chief, I recognize. Oh, while these ears can hear thee, say, has Han survived this day? Why ask, Vibhisha cried, for one of lower rank, the wine god's son? Hast thou forgotten, first in place, the princely chief of Rahu's race? Can King Sugr claim no care, and Angad, his imperial heir? Yea, dearer than my noblest friends is he on whom our hope depends. For if the wine god's son survive, all we though dead are yet alive. But if his precious life be fled though living still we are but dead, he is our hope and sure relief. Thus slowly spoke the aged chief, then to his side Han came, and with low reverence named his name. Cheered by the face he longed to view, the wounded chieftain lived anew. Go forth, he cried, O strong and brave, and in their woe the Vyars save. No might but thine, supremely great, may help us in our lost estate. The trembling bears and Vyars cheer, calm their sad hearts, dispel their fear. Save Rahu's noble sons, and heal the deep wounds of the winged steel. High o'er the waters of the sea to far Himaya's summits flee. Kala there wilt thou behold, and Rishab, with his peaks of gold. Between them see a mountain rise whose splendor will enchant thine eyes. His sides are clothed above, below, with all the rarest herbs that grow. Upon that mountain's lofty crest 4 plants, of sovereign powers possessed, spring from the soil, and flashing there shed radiance through the neighboring air. One draws the shaft, one brings again the breath of life to warm the slain. One heals each wound. One gives anew to faded cheeks their wonted hue. Fly, chieftain, to that mountain's brow and bring those herbs to save us now. Han heard, and springing through the air like Vish, U's discus 991 flew. The sea was past, beneath him, gay with bright-winged birds, the mountains lay, and brook and lake and lonely glen, and fertile lands with toiling men. On he sped, before him rose the mansion of perennial snows. There soared the glorious peaks as fair as white clouds in the summer air. Here, bursting from the leafy shade, in thunder leapt the wild cascade. He looked on many a pure tree dear to the gods and sages' feet, the spot where Brahm dwells apart, the place whence Rudra launched his dart. 992 Vish. U's high seat and Indra's home, and slopes where wise servants roam. There was Kuvra's bright abode. There Brahma's mystic weapon glowed. There was the noble hill whereon PG 484 those herbs with wondrous luster shone, and, ravished by the glorious sight, Han rested on the height. He, moving down the glittering peak, the healing herbs began to seek, but, when he thought to seize the prize, they hid them from his eager eyes. Then to the hill in wrath he spake, Mine arm this day shall vengeance take, if thou wilt feel no pity, none, in this great need of Rahu's son. He ceased, his mighty arms he bent, and from the trembling mountain rent his huge head with the life it bore, snakes, elephants, and golden ore. O'er hill and plain and watery waste his rapid way again he traced. And mid the wondering Vyars laid his burthen through the air conveyed, the wondrous herbs delightful scent to all the host new vigour lent. Free from all darts and wounds and pain the sons of Rahu lived again, and dead and dying Vyars healed rose vigorous from the battlefield. Canto LXXV. The Night Attack. Sugr spake in words like these, Now, Vyar lords, the occasion seize. For now, of sons and brothers reft, to our little hope is left, and if our host his gates assail his weak defence will surely fail. At dead of night the Vyar bands rushed on with torches in their hands. Scared by the coming of the host each giant warder left his post. Where'er the Vyar legions came their way was marked with hostile flame that spread in fury to devour palace and temple, gate and tower. Down came the walls and porches, down came stately piles that graced the town. In many a house the fire was red, on sandalwood and aloe fed. And scorching flames in billows rolled o'er diamonds and pearls and gold. On cloth of wool, on silk brocade, on linen robes their fury preyed. Wheels, poles and yokes were burned, and all the coursers' harness in the stall. And elephants and chariots' gear, the sword, the buckler, and the spear. Scared by the crash of falling beams, mid lamentations, groans and screams, forth rushed the giants through the flames, and with them dragged bewildered dames, each, with o'erwhelming terror wild, still clasping to her breast a child. The swift fire from a cloud of smoke through many a gilded lattice broke, and, melting pearl and coral, rose o'er balconies and porticos. The startled crane and peacock screamed as with strange light the courtyard gleamed, and fierce unusual glare was thrown on shrinking wood and heated stone. From burning stall and stable freed rushed frantic elephant and steed, and goaded by the driving blaze fled wildly through the crowded ways. As earth with fervent heat will glow when comes her final overthrow. From gate to gate, from court to spire proud Lank was one blaze of fire, and every headland, rock and bay shone bright 100 leagues away. Forth, blinded by the heat and flame, ran countless giants huge of frame. And, mustering for fierce attack, the VRs charged to drive them back, while shout and scream and roar and cry rehoed through the earth and sky. There RA stood with strength renewed, and ever, as the foe he viewed, shaking the distant regions rang his mighty bow's tremendous clang. Then through the gates Nakumha hied, and Kumha by his brother's side, sent forth he bravest and the best to battle by the king's behest. There fought the chiefs in open field, and Angad fell and Dwivit reeled. Sugr saw, by rage impelled he crushed the bow which Kumha held. About his foe Sugr wound his arms, and, heaving from the ground the giant hurled him o'er the bank. And deep beneath the sea he sank. Like Mandar hill with furious swell upleapt the waters where he fell. Again he rose, he sprang to lend and raised on high his threatening hand, full on Sugra's chest it came and shook the VR's massy frame, but on the wounded bone he broke his wrist, oh furious was the stroke. With force that naught could stay or check, Sugr smote him neath the neck. The fierce blow crashed through flesh and bone, and Kumha lay in death o'erthrown. Nakumha saw his brother die, and red with fury flashed his eye. He dashed with mighty sway and swing PG 485 his axe against the VR king. But shattered on that living rock it split in fragments at the shock. Sugr, rising to the blow, raised his huge hand and smote his foe. And in the dust the giant lay gasping in blood his soul away. I have briefly dispatched Kumha and Nakumha, each of whom has in the text a long canto to himself. When they fall RA sends forth Makar Shah or Crocodile Eye, the son of Kara, who was slain by RA in the forest before the abduction of the account of his sallying forth, of his battle with RA and of his death by the fiery dart of that hero occupies 2 cantos which I entirely pass over. Indra again comes forth and, rendered invisible by his magic art, slays countless VRs with his unerring arrows. He retires to the city and returns bearing in his chariot an effigy of the work of magic, weeping and wailing by his side. He grasps the lovely image by the hair and cuts it down with his scimitar in the sight of the enraged Hun and all the VR host. At last, after much fighting of the usual kind, Indra's chariot is broken in pieces, his charioteer is slain, and he himself falls by Lakshma's hand, to the inexpressible delight of the high-souled saints, the nymphs of heaven and other celestial beings. Canto XCII Iron's Lament. They sought the king, a mournful train, and cried, "My lord, thy son is slain." By Lakshma's hand, before these eyes, the warrior fell no more to rise. No time is this for vain regret, thy hero son a hero met. And he whose might in battle pressed Lord Indra and the gods confessed, whose power was stranger to defeat, has gained in heaven a blissful seat. The monarch heard the mournful tale, his heart was faint, his cheek was pale. His fleeting sense at length regained, in trembling tones he thus complained, "Ah me, my son, my pride, the boast and glory of the giant host! Could Lakshma's puny might defeat the foe whom Indra feared to meet? Could not thy deadly arrows split proud Mandar's peaks, O Indra, and the destroyer's self destroy? And wast thou conquered by a boy? I will not weep. Thy noble deed has blessed thee with immortal meed gained by each hero in the skies who fighting for his sovereign dies. Now, fearless of all mainer foes, the guardian gods 993 will taste repose. But earth to me, with hill and plain, is desolate, for thou art slain. Ah, whither hast thou fled, and left thy mother, lank me bereft? Left pride and state and wives behind, and lordship over all thy kind? I fondly hoped thy hand should pay due honors on my dying day, and couldst thou, O beloved, flee and leave thy funeral rites to me? Life has no comfort left me, none, oh and dry my son, my son. Thus wailed he broken by his woes, but swift the thought of vengeance rose. In awful wrath his teeth he gnashed, and from his eyes red lightning flashed. Hot from his mouth came fire and smoke, as thus the king in fury spoke. Through many a thousand years of yore the penance and the pain I bore, and by fierce torment well sustained the highest grace of Brahm gained, his plighted word my life assured, from gods of heaven and fiends secured. He armed my limbs with burnished mail whose luster turns the sunbeams pale, in battle proof gainst heavenly bands with thunder in their threatening hands. Armed in this mail myself will go with Brahma's gift my deadly bow, and, cleaving through the foes my way, the slayers of my son will slay. Then, by his grief to frenzy wrought, the captive in the grove he sought. Swift through the shady path he sped, earth trembled at his furious tread. Fierce were his eyes, his monstrous hand held drawn for death his glittering brand. PG 486 There weeping stood the Mayflow dame, she shuddered as the giant came. Near drew the rover of the night and raised his sword in act to smite. But, by his nobler heart impelled, one Arshus lord his arm withheld. Wilt thou, great monarch, thus he cried, wilt thou, to heavenly gods allied, blot for all time thy glorious fame, the slayer of a gentle dame? What? Shall a woman's blood be spilt to stain thee with eternal guilt, thee deep in all the Vedas' lore? Far be the thought forevermore. Ah, look, and let her lovely face this fury from thy bosom chase. He ceased, the prudent counsel pleased the monarch, and his wrath appeased. Then to his council hall in haste the giant lord his steps retraced. I omit 2 cantos, in the first of which Ra with an enchanted Gandharva weapon deals destruction among the Arshuses sent out by Ra. And in the second the Arshus dames lament the slain and mourn over the madness of Ra. Canto XCVIR and Sally. The groans and cries of dames who wailed the ears of Lank's lord assailed, for from each house and home was sent the voice of weeping and lament. In troubled thought his head he bowed, then fiercely loosing on the crowd of nobles near his throne he broke the silence, and in fury spoke, this day my deadly shafts shall fly, and Rahu's sons shall surely die. This day shall countless VRs bleed and dogs and kites and vultures feed. Go, bid them swift my car prepare, bring the great bow I long to bear, and let my host with sword and shield and spear be ready for the field. From street to street the captains passed and Arshus warriors gathered fast. With spear and sword to pierce and strike, and axe and club and mace and pike. I omit several weapons for which I cannot find distinctive names, and among them the cetagn or centocide, supposed by some to be a kind of firearms or rocket, but described by a commentator on the Mahāchāta as a stone or cylindrical piece of wood studded with iron spikes. Then R.A.'s warrior chariot 994 wrought with gold and rich inlay was brought. Mid tinkling bells and weapons clanged the monarch on the chariot sprang, which, decked with gems of every hue, 8 steeds of noble lineage drew. Mid roars of drum and shell rang out from countless throats a joyful shout. As, girt with hosts in warlike pride, through Lank's streets the tyrant hied. Still, louder than the roar of drums, went up the cry, he comes, our ever-conquering Lord who trod beneath his feet both fiend and god. On to the gate the warriors swept where Rahu's sons their station kept. When R.A.'s car the portal passed the sun in heaven was overcast. Earth rocked and reeled from side to side and birds with boding voices cried. Against the standard of the king a vulture flapped his horrid wing. Big gouts of blood before him dropped, his trembling steeds in terror stopped. The hue of death was on his cheek, and scarce his flattering tongue could speak, when, terrible with flash and flame, through murky air a meteor came. Still by the hand of death impelled his onward way the giant held. The VRs in the field afar heard the loud thunder of his car, and turned with warriors' fierce delight to meet the giant in the fight. He came, his clanging bow he drew, and myriads of the VRs slew. Some through the side and heart he cleft, some headless on the plain were left. Some struggling groaned with mangled thighs, or broken arms or blinded eyes. I omit cantos XCVII, XCVII, and XCIX, which describe in the usual way 3 single combats between Sugra and Angad on the VR side and Veer Shah, Mahadar, and Masva on the side of the giants. The weapons of the VRs are trees and rocks. The giants fight with swords, axes, and bows and arrows. The details are generally the same as those of preceding duels. The giants fall, one in each canto. PG 487 canto CR, and in the field the plain with bleeding limbs was spread, and heaps of dying and of dead. His mighty bow still RA strained, and shafts upon the giants rained. Still Angad and Sugra, wrought to fury, for the VRs fought. Crushed with huge racks through chest and side, Mahadar, Masva died, and Veer Shah stained with gore dropped on the plain to rise no more. When RA saw the 3 overthrown, he cried aloud in furious tone, Urge, urge the car, my charioteer, the haughty Vyar's death is near. This very day shall end our griefs for leaguered town and slaughtered chiefs. Ra the tree whose lovely fruit is S shall this arm uproot, whose branches with protecting shade are 5 our lords who lend him aid. Thus cried the king, the welkin rang as forth the eager coursers sprang, and earth beneath the chariot shook with flowery grove and hill and brook. Fast rained his shafts, where'er he sped the conquered VRs fell or fled, on rolled the car in swift career till Rahu's noble sons were near. Then Ra looked upon the foe and strained and tried his sounding bow, till earth and all the region rang re-echoing to the awful clang. His bow the younger chieftain bent, and shaft on shaft at Ra sent. He shot, but Ra little recked. Each arrow with his own he checked, and headless, baffled of its aim, to earth the harmless missile came. And Lakshma stayed his arm o'erpowered by the thick darts the giants showered. Fierce waxed the fight and fiercer yet, for Ra now and Ra met, and each on other poured amain the tempest of his arrowy rain. While all the sky above was dark with missiles speeding to their mark like clouds, with flashing lightning twined about them, hurried by the wind. Not fiercer was the wondrous fight when Vritra fell by Indra's might. All arts of war each foeman knew, and trained alike, his bowstring drew. Red-eyed with fury Lanka's king pressed his huge fingers on the string, and fixed in Ra's brows a flight of arrows winged with matchless flight. Still Rahu's son endured, and bore that crown of shafts though wounded sore. O'er a dire dart a spell he spoke with mystic power to aid the stroke. In vain upon the foe it smote rebounding from the steel-proof coat. The giant armed his bow anew, and wondrous weapons hissed and flew, terrific, deadly, swift of flight, beaked like the vulture and the kite, or bearing heads of fearful make, of lion, tiger, wolf and snake. 995 Then Ra, troubled by the storm of flying darts in every form shot by an arm that naught could tire, launched at the foe his dart of fire, which, sacred to the Lord of Flame, burned and consumed where'er it came. And many a blazing shaft beside the hero to his string applied. With fiery course of dazzling hue swift to the mark each missile flew, some flashing like a shooting star, some as the tongues of lightning are. One like a brilliant plant, one in splendor like the morning sun. Where'er the shafts of Ra burned the giant's darts were foiled and turned. Far into space his weapons fled, but as they flew struck thousands dead. Canto Ci. Lakshman's fall. When Ra saw his darts repelled, with double rage his bosom swelled. He summoned, wroth but undismayed, a mightier charm to lend its aid. and, fierce as fire before the blast, a storm of missiles thick and fast, spear, pike and javelin, mace and brand, came hurtling from the giant's hand. But, mightier still, the arms employed by Rahu's son their force destroyed, and every dart fell dulled and spent by powers the bards of heaven had lent. With his huge mace Vibhisha slew the steeds that Ra's chariot drew. PG 488 Then Ra hurled in deadly ire a ponderous spear that flashed like fire, but Ra's arrows checked its way, and harmless on the earth it lay. The giant seized a mightier spear, which Death himself would shun with fear. Vibhisha with a stroke had died, but Lakshma's hand his bowstring plied, and flying arrows thick as hail smote fiercely on the giant's mail. Then Ra turned his aim aside, on Lakshma looked and fiercely cried, Thou again my wrath hast braved, and from his death Vibhisha saved. Now in his stead this spear receive, whose deadly point thy heart shall cleave. He ceased, he hurled the mortal dart by Maya forged with magic art. The spear, with all his fury flung, swift, flickering like a serpent's tongue, adorned with many a tinkling bell, smote Lakshma, and the hero fell. When Ra saw, he heaved a sigh, a tear one moment dimmed his eye. But tender grief was soon repressed and thoughts of vengeance filled his breast. The air around him flashed and gleamed as from his bow the arrows streamed. And Lank's lord, the foeman's dread, overwhelmed with terror turned and fled. Canto Cii. Lakshman healed. But Ra, pride of Rahu's race, gazed tenderly on Lakshma's face, and, as the sight his spirit broke, turned to Sush, and sadly spoke, Where is my power and valour? How shall I have heart for battle now, when dead before my weeping eyes my brother, noblest Lakshma, lies? My tears in blinding torrents flow, my hand unnerved has dropped my bow. The pangs of woe have blanched my cheek, my heart is sick, my strength is weak. Ah me, my brother! Ah, that I by Lakshma's side might sink and die. Life, war and conquest, all are vain if Lakshma lies in battle slain. Why will those eyes my glances shun? Hast thou no word of answer? None? Ah, is thy noble spirit flown and gone to other worlds alone? Couldst thou not let thy brother seek those worlds with thee? Oh speak, oh speak! Rise up once more, my brother, rise, look on me with thy loving eyes. Were not thy steps beside me still in gloomy wood, on breezy hill? Did not thy gentle care assuage thy brother's grief and fitful rage? Didst thou not all his troubles share, his guide and comfort in despair? As Ra, vanquished, wept and sighed, the VR chieftain thus replied, Great prince, unmanly thoughts dismiss, nor yield thy soul to grief like this. In vain those burning tears are shed, our glory Lakshma is not dead. Death on his brow no mark has set, where beauty's luster lingers yet. Clear is the skin, and tender hues of lotus flowers his palms suffuse. O Ra, cheer thy trembling heart. Not thus do life and body part. Now, Hanum, to thee I speak, hie hence to Tal Mahadaya's 996 peak, where herbs of sovereign virtue grow, which life and health and strength bestow. Bring thou the leaves to balm his pain, and Lakshma shall be well again. He ceased, the wine god's son obeyed, swift through the clouds his way he made. He reached the hill, nor stayed to find the wondrous herbs of healing kind. From its broad base the mount he tore, with all the shrubs and trees it bore, sped through the clouds again and showed to wise Sush his woody load 997. Sush in wonder viewed the hill, and culled the salver and salve of ill. Soon as the healing herb he found, the fragrant leaves he crushed and ground. Then over Lakshma's face he bent, who, healed and strengthened by the scent of that blessed herb divinely sweet, rose fresh and lusty on his feet. Canto Cii. Indra's car. Then Rahu's son forgot his woe, again he grasped his fallen bow and hurled at Lank's lord amain the tempest of his arrowy rain. PG 489 Drawn by the steeds his lords had brought, Again the giant turned and fought, and drove his glittering chariot nigh as springs the day god through the sky. Then, as his sounding bow he bent, like thunderbolts his shafts were sent, as when dark clouds in rain time shed fierce torrents on a mountain's head. High on his car the giant rode, on foot the son of Rahu strode. The gods from their celestial height indignant saw the unequal fight. Then he whom heavenly hosts revere, Lord Indra, called his charioteer. Haste, Emali, he cried, descend. To Rahu's son my chariot lend. With cheering words the chief address, and all the gods thy deed will bless. He bowed. He brought the glorious car whose tinkling bells were heard afar. Fair as the sun of morning, bright with gold and pearl and lazulite. He yoked the steeds of tawny hue that swifter than the tempest flew. Then down the slope of heaven he hied and stayed the car by Ra's side. Ascend, O chief, he humbly cried, the chariot which the gods provide. The mighty bow of Indra see, sent by the gods who favor thee. Behold this coat of glittering mail, and spear and shafts which never fail. Cheered by the grace the immortals showed, the chieftain on the chariot rode. Then as the car-borne warriors met, the awful fight raged fiercer yet. Each shaft that Ra shot became a serpent red with kindled flame, and round the limbs of Ra hung with fiery jaws and quivering tongue. But every serpent fled dismayed when Rahu's valiant son displayed the weapon of the feathered king, 998, and loosed his arrows from the string. But Ra armed his bow anew, and showers of shafts at Ra flew, while the fierce king in swift career smote with a dart the charioteer. An arrow shot by Ra's hand laid the proud banner on the sand, and Indra's steeds of heavenly strain fell by the iron tempest slain. On gods and spirits of the air fell terror, trembling, and despair. The sea's white billows mounted high with froth and foam to drench the sky. The sun by lurid clouds was veiled, the friendly lights of heaven were paled. And, fiercely gleaming, fiery Mars opposed the beams of gentler stars. Then Ra's eyes with fury blazed as Indra's heavenly spear he raised. Loud rang the bells, the glistering head bright flashes through the region shed. Down came the spear in swift descent, the giant's lance was crushed and bent. Then Ra's horses brave and fleet fell dead beneath his arrowy sleet. Fierce on his foeman Ra pressed, and gored with shafts his mighty breast. And spouting streams of crimson dyed the weary giant's limbs inside. I omit cantos CIV and CV in which the fight is renewed and Ra severely reprimands his charioteer for timidity and want of confidence in his master's prowess, and orders him to charge straight at Ra on the next occasion. Canto CVI. Glory to the sun. There faint and bleeding fast, apart stood Ra, raging in his heart. Then, moved with ruth for Ra's sake, Agastya 999 came and gently spake, Bend, Ra, bend thy heart and ear the everlasting truth to hear, which all thy hopes through life will bless and crown thine arms with full success. The rising sun with golden rays, light of the worlds, adore and praise, the universal King, the Lord by hosts of heaven and fiends adored. He tempers all with soft control, he is the gods' diviner soul. And gods above and fiends below and men to him their safety owe. He Brahm Vish, you, Siva, he each person of the glorious three, is every god whose praise we tell, the King of heaven, 1000 the Lord of hell, 1001 each god revered from times of old, the Lord of war, 1002 the King of gold, 1003 PG 490 Mahendra, time and death is he, the moon, the ruler of the sea 1004 he hears our praise in every form, the Manes, 1005 gods who ride the storm, 1006 the Asvins, 1007 Manu, 1008 they who stand round Indra, 1009 and the highest 1010 band. He is the air, and life and fire, the universal source and sire, he brings the seasons at his call, creator, light, and nurse of all. His heavenly course he joys to run, maker of day, the golden sun. The steeds that whirl his car are 7, 10, 11 the flaming steeds that flash through heaven. Lord of the sky, The conqueror parts the clouds of night with glistering darts. He, master of the Vedas lore, commands the clouds' collected store. He is the river's surest friend. He bids the rains, and they descend. Stars, planets, constellations own their monarch of the golden throne. Lord of 12 forms, 10-12 to thee I bow, most glorious King of heaven art thou. O.R.A. He who pays a right due worship to the Lord of light shall never fall oppressed by ill, but find a stay and comfort still. Adore with all thy heart and mind this God of gods, to him resigned. And thou his saving power shalt know victorious o'er thy giant foe. This canto does not appear in the Bengal recension. It comes in awkwardly and may I think be considered as an interpolation, but I paraphrase a portion of it as a relief after so much fighting and carnage, and as an interesting glimpse of the monotheistic ideas which underlie the Hindu religion. The hymn does not readily lend itself to metrical translation, and I have not attempted here to give a faithful rendering of the whole. A literal version of the text and the commentary given in the Calcutta edition will be found in the additional notes. A canto is here omitted. It contains fighting of the ordinary kind between R.A. and R.A., and a description of sights and sounds of evil omen foreboding the destruction of the giant. Canto CVII. The battle. He spoke, and vanished. R.A. raised his eyes with reverence meet, and praised the glorious day God full in view, then armed him for the fight anew. Urged onward by his charioteer the giant's foaming steeds came near, and furious was the battle's din where each resolved to die or win. The Arsha's host and Vr band stood with their weapons in their hands, and watched in terror and dismay the fortune of the awful fray. The giant chief with rage inflamed his darts at R.A.'s pennon aimed. But when they touched the chariot made by heavenly hands their force was stayed. Then R.A.'s breast with fury swelled. He strained the mighty bow he held, and straight at R.A.'s banner flew an arrow as the string he drew, a deadly arrow swift of flight, like some huge snake ablaze with light, whose fury none might e'er repel, and, split in twain, the standard fell. At R.A.'s steeds sharp arrows, hot with flames of fire, the giant shot. Unmoved the heavenly steeds sustained the furious shower, the warrior reigned, as though soft lotus tendril smote each haughty crest and glossy coat. Then volleyed swift by magic art, tree, mountain peak and spear and dart, trident and pike and club and mace flew hurtling straight at R.A.'s face. But R.A. with his steeds and car escaped the storm which fell afar where the strange missiles, as they rushed to earth, 1,000 VRs crushed. PG 491 Canto CIX. The battle. With wondrous power and might and skill the giant fought with R.A. still. Each at his foe his chariot drove, and still for death or victory strove. The warriors' steeds together dashed, and pole with pole re-hooing clashed. Then R.A. launching dart on dart made R.A.'s coursers swerve and start. Nor was the Lord of Length slow to rain his arrows on the foe, who showed, by fiery points assailed, no trace of pain, nor shook nor quailed. Dense clouds of arrows R.A. shot with that strong arm which rested not, and spear and mace and club and brand fell in dire rain from R.A.'s hand. The storm of missiles fiercely cast stirred up the oceans with its blast, and serpent gods and fiends who dwell below were troubled by the swell. The earth with hill and plain and brook and grove and garden reeled and shook, the very sun grew cold and pale, and horror still the rising gale. God and Gandharva, sage and saint cried out, with grief and terror faint, "Oh, may the Prince of Rahu's line give peace to Bearman's and to Kine, and, rescuing the worlds, o'erthrow the giant king or awful foe." Then to his deadly string the pride of Rahu's race's shaft applied. Sharp as a serpent's venomed fang straight to its mark the arrow sprang, and from the giant's body shred with trenchant steel the monstrous head. There might the triple world behold that severed head adorned with gold. But when all eyes were bent to view, swift in its stead another grew. Again the shaft was pointed well, again the head divided fell. But still as each to earth was cast another head succeeded fast. 100, bright with fiery flame, fell low before the victor's aim, yet R.A. by no sign betrayed that death was near or strength decayed. The doubtful fight he still maintained, and on the foe his missiles rained. In air, on earth, on plain, on hill, with awful might he battled still. And through the hours of night and day the conflict knew no pause or stay. Canto CX death. Then Emily to Ra cried, let other arms the day decide. Why wilt thou strive with useless toil and see his might thy efforts foil? Launch at the foe thy dart whose fire was kindled by the Almighty Sire. He ceased, and Rahu's son obeyed. Upon his string the hero laid an arrow, like a snake that hissed, whose fiery flight had never missed. The arrow Saint Agastya gave and blessed the chieftain's life to save. That dart the eternal Father made the monarch of the gods to aid. By Brahma's self on him bestowed when forth to fight Lord Indra rode. 'Twas feathered with the rushing wind. The glowing sun and fire combined to the keen point their splendor lent. The shaft, ethereal element, by Meru's hill and Mandar, pride of mountains, had its weight supplied. He laid it on the twisted cord, he turned the point at Lanka's lord, and swift the limb-dividing dart pierced the huge chest and cleft the heart, and dead he fell upon the plain like Vritra by the thunderer slain. The Ra's host when Ra fell sent forth a wild terrific yell, then turned and fled, all hope resigned, through Lanka's gates, nor looked behind. His voice each joyous VR raised, and Ra, conquering Ra, praised. Soft from celestial minstrels came the sound of music and acclaim. Soft, fresh, and cool, a rising breeze brought odors from the heavenly trees, and ravishing the sight and smell a wondrous rain of blossoms fell, and voices breathed round Rahu's son, champion of gods, well done, well done. Canto CXI. Vibhasan's lament. Vibhasha saw his brother slain, nor could his heart its woe contain. O'er the dead king he sadly bent and mourned him with a loud lament. O hero, bold and brave, he cried, skilled in all arms, in battle tried. Spoiled of thy crown, with limbs outspread, PG 492 why wilt thou press thy gory bed? Why slumber on the earth's cold breast, when sumptuous couches woo to rest? Ah me, my brother overbold, thine is the fate my heart foretold, but love and pride forbade to hear the friend who blamed thy wild career. Fallen is the sun who gave us light, our lordly moon is veiled in night. Our beacon fire is dead and cold, 100 waves have o'er it rolled. What could his light and fire avail against Lord Ra's arrowy hail? Woe for the giant's royal tree, whose stately height was fair to see. His buds were deeds of kingly grace, his bloom the sons who decked his race. With rifled bloom and mangled bough the royal tree lies prostrate now. Nay, idly mourn not, Ra cried, the warrior king has nobly died, intrepid hero, firm through all, so fell he as the brave should fall. And ill beseems it chiefs like us to weep for those who perish thus. Be firm, thy cause thus grief restrain, and pay the dues that yet remain. Again Vibhasha sadly spoke, his was the hero arm that broke embattled gods and Indra's might, unconquered ere today in fight. He rushed against thee, fought and fell, as ocean, when his waters swell, hurling his might against a rock, falls spent and shattered by the shock. Woe for our king's untimely end, the generous lord the trusty friend, our sure defense when fear arose, a dreaded scourge to stubborn foes. Oh, let the king thy hand has slain the honors of the dead obtain. Then Ra answered, hatred dies when low in dust the foeman lies. Now triumph bids the conflict cease, and knits us in the bonds of peace. Let funeral rites be duly paid, and be it mine thy toil to aid. Canto CXII. The Arshus dames. High rose the universal wail that mourned the monarch's death, and, pale with crushing woe, her hair unbound, her eyes in floods of sorrow drowned, forth from the inner chambers came with trembling feet each royal dame, heedless of those who bade them stay. They reached the field where Ra lay, there falling by their husband's side. Ah, king! Ah, dearest lord! They cried. Like creepers shattered by the storm they threw them on his mangled form. One to his bleeding bosom crept and lifted up her voice and wept. About his feet one mourner clung, around his neck another hung, one on the giant's severed head, her pearly tears and torrents shed fast as the drops the summer shower pours down upon the lotus flower. Ah, he whose arm in anger reared the king of gods and ya feared, while panic struck their heavenly train, lies prostrate in the battle slain. Thy haughty heart thou wouldst not bend, nor listen to each wiser friend. Ah, had the dame, as they implored, been yielded to her injured lord, we had not mourned this day thy fall, and happy had it been for all. Then Ra and thy friends content in blissful peace their days had spent. Thine injured brother had not fled, nor giant chiefs and Viars bled. Yet for these woes we will not blame thy fancy for the faithful dame. Fate, ruthless fate, whom none may bend, has urged thee to thy hapless end. Canto Cxii Mandodar's Lament. While thus they wept, supreme in place, the loveliest for form and face, Mandodar drew near alone, looked on her lord and made her moan. Ah, monarch, Indra feared to stand in fight before thy conquering hand. From thy dread spear the immortals ran. And art thou murdered by a man? Ah, 'twas no child of earth, I know, that smote thee with that mortal blow. 'Twas Death himself in Ra's shape, that slew thee, Death whom none escape. Or was it he who rules the skies who met thee, clothed in man's disguise? Ah no, my lord, not Indra, he in battle ne'er could look on thee. One only god thy match I deem, 'twas Vish. You self, the Lord supreme, whose days through ceaseless time extend and ne'er began and ne'er shall end, he with the discus, shell, and mace, brought ruin on the giant race. Girt by the gods of heaven arrayed like 5 hosts his strength to aid, he Ra's shape and arms assumed PG 493 and slew the king whom fate had doomed. In Janasth when Kara died with giant legions by his side, no mortal was the unconquered foe in Ra's form who struck the blow. When Hanum the van came and burnt thy town with hostile flame, I counselled peace in anxious fear, I counselled, but thou wouldst not hear. Thy fancy for the foreign dame has wrought thee death and endless shame. Why should thy foolish fancy roam? Hadst thou not wives as fair at home? In beauty, form and grace could she, dear lord, surpass or rival me? Now will the days of glide in tranquil joy by Ra's side, and me, around me raves a sea of woe with whelming waves. With thee in days of old I trod each spot beloved,